Chapter 738. As Lucius Malfoy stopped his original plan, Zhang Cheng controlled Draco to retrieve the book that contained the soul tool that Voldemort had created when he was young. Of course, the awakened Tom Liddell was unwilling to return to the diary obediently. Thus, he had no choice but to resort to violent means. He was almost discovered by the curious Harry Potter and Albus Dumbledore, who was controlling the situation from behind the scenes. Fortunately, at the crucial moment, Ginny Weasley took the initiative to stand up and take all the responsibility. Otherwise, it would have been difficult for him to clean up the mess. However, the price was that at the end of the second semester, Severus Snape accompanied Draco to the Malfoy family's manor. Zhang Cheng stared at the potion master, who looked as gloomy as a bat, but his heart was filled with love and guilt. Zhang Cheng could not help but curl his lips into a smile as he greeted, "Good afternoon, Mr. Professor. I heard from Derek that you're here to visit me." "Good afternoon, Mr. Zhang. Please forgive my presumptuousness. You have really piqued my interest, especially your teaching method, which allowed young Malfoy to master magic skills that far exceeded his peers in a very short period of time." Snape bowed gracefully and complimented. Even when they were talking, his eyes were secretly observing Snape's every move. "Oh, are you interested in this? Or is the great principal of Hogwarts interested in this?" Zhang Cheng probed, without batting an eyelid. Perhaps others would think that Severus Snape had no choice but to submit to Dumbledore, but he knew that the relationship between the two was very complicated. The former was almost completely subservient to the latter's leadership, even if there were occasional conflicts on the surface. "We are all very interested. After all, teaching students to master more knowledge and magic has always been the principle of Hogwarts since its establishment. If it is possible, Principal Dumbledore would like to invite you to Hogwarts to exchange your knowledge and take up the position of a magic practical professor. We may not be able to give you a generous salary like the Malfoy family, but we can give you a reputation." Snape calmly extended the invitation. It had to be said that his mental fortitude was quite strong. Even when his intentions were exposed, he didn't show the slightest bit of nervousness. No wonder he could fool Voldemort in the future. "My dear friend, it doesn't seem very good for you to poach the Malfoy family in front of me, right?" Lucius finally couldn't stand it anymore and questioned. "Relax, don't be so nervous. I'm only inviting you on behalf of the school. As to whether you want to go or not, the choice is not up to you and me, but the person involved." Snape shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. "Damn it, Dumbledore has usurped the board of directors? Dream. Snape, 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 Snape. All right, don't get angry at me. You should know that I'm just a messenger. Also, Mr. Zhang, Principal Dumbledore's invitation is valid until the start of the next semester. If you are interested, you can report to Hogwarts at any time." With that, Snape bowed again, waved his wand, and cast Phantom Transfiguration, disappearing from the spot. It was only after he left for more than 5 minutes that Lucius quickly calmed down. His pale face didn't show any signs of losing control of his emotions. He sneered and mocked. "Just as you expected, that old fellow can't sit still. So, do you want to respond to his invitation to become a professor at Hogwarts? I believe that as long as we work together, it won't take long for us to chase him away." "Why not? You must know that it is the place with the most complete collection of magical books and information in the entire United Kingdom. Who knows, I might be able to find something that will inspire my research. As for working together, let's forget about it. I don't have much interest in power, and I won't waste my precious time fighting for power." Zhang Cheng, without a doubt, knew what Snape was expecting, so he straightforwardly gave a negative answer. To spend so much effort to rule over a few 100,000 modern magi with low combat power, he would have to be mentally ill to make such a foolish choice. On the contrary, he had an even grander and more ambitious plan. That was to trigger a worldwide nuclear war on the eve of his departure, wiping out more than 90% of the population. This insane method would not only allow him to collect countless souls, but also allow him to pry into the power of the law of death through a large number of deaths. Unfortunately, No one had been able to see through the madness hidden under Zhang Cheng's calm appearance. To be exact, no normal person would be able to imagine that a seemingly powerful, mature, and steady young magus was a monster that was more dangerous and terrifying than Voldemort. After making his decision, Zhang Cheng didn't immediately set off to meet Dumbledore. Instead, he stayed in Malfoy Manor to continue his research. It wasn't until a few days before the Hogwarts school term was about to start that he bid farewell to Lucius and his wife. Alone, he pretended to carry a leather suitcase and walked into the magical castle with a long history. As soon as he stepped into the headmaster's office, the white-bearded Albus Dumbledore immediately stood up and laughed. I've been waiting for you for so long, Mr. Zhang. Or perhaps I should call you Mr. Professor in advance. You must know that Easter Magi are not commonly seen in the British magic world. Thank you. I'm honored to receive your praise. Zhang Cheng placed one hand on his chest and humbly bowed. No. I should be the honored one. Dumbledore pushed up his glasses and gently waved his hand. To be able to improve the quality of teaching is the dream of every Hogwarts headmaster. In particular, there were many attacks last semester. Until now, we still haven't been able to find the real culprit, so improving the students' level of self-defense is of utmost importance. Can you tell me how you train Mr. Malfoy to be able to become so outstanding in such a short period of time? It's very simple. Actual combat training that surpasses the limits. I can create an illusion through magic so that Draco can continuously battle with the illusion and gain more experience and proficiency. I believe you should have heard that in the East, there is a belief that strict teachers produce outstanding students. Only through the most rigorous education can a child grow into an outstanding talent. Actual combat training. The old man frowned subconsciously. Won't he get hurt? Of course he will get hurt, but I will strictly control it to ensure that there will be no serious injuries or deaths. Injury is not always a bad thing. Pain is sometimes the best teacher. It will make the students remember how to avoid making the same mistake next time. Zhang Cheng pretended to be a demon teacher and endlessly explained his Spartan teaching philosophy. Chapter 739. Without a doubt, Zhang Cheng's suggestion of practical combat teaching did not fit Albus Dumbledore's philosophy at all. But for some unknown reason, he finally agreed to this extremely unreliable plan and officially appointed him as the professor of the magic practical class. Looking at the old man's deep eyes, Zhang Cheng smiled meaningfully, stood up, and walked out of the principal's office, disappearing at the end of the tangled corridors of the Hogwarts. Not long after he left, Snape barged in and asked with a serious face, "Are you sure that bringing this guy to school is the right choice?" "Of course, Severus. I believe you should have investigated. The timing of his appearance is too coincidental. First, a dozen Luo AO were killed on the streets of London, followed by the opening of the secret room, and Ginny Weasley being controlled by a mysterious diary. I have enough reason to suspect him, don't I?" Dumbledore took off his glasses and spoke his reason meaningfully. "Damn it, I'm not talking about this. But if we put him in school, wouldn't it be too dangerous for the students, especially Harry Potter? If he really is the Dark Lord's subordinate, the consequences would be unthinkable." Snape slammed the table and roared loudly. "Dangerous?" The old man shook his head lightly. "No, the school is the safest place. Here, no matter what Mr. Zhang wants to do, there will be countless pairs of eyes watching him. All right, I hope you are right, but I will use my own methods to monitor him." After saying this, Snape turned and strode out of the principal's office. Even an idiot could feel the anger in his heart. Dumbledore turned a blind eye to this and just stared at the photo in the newspaper. No one knew what he was thinking, but this had nothing to do with Zhang Cheng. Ever since he moved into the Hogwarts, he spent almost all of his time in the huge library, basically living the life of an otaku who did not leave the house at all. Although most of these books and materials were meaningless repetitions, there was still an extremely small portion that recorded precious information and knowledge. Because of the professor's privilege, no matter how dangerous or profound the books were, Zhang Cheng would not be stopped. Therefore, in just a few days, Zhang Cheng got what he wanted. He He did not notice that the students had arrived at the school by express train. Along with them was a large group of magical creatures called Dementors. Professor Zhang, the opening ceremony and the division ceremony will be held in about 10 minutes. Don't you plan on heading to the auditorium? Snape suddenly appeared beside the bookshelf in the library with a fake smile on his face. Oh, do I have to attend? Zhang Cheng asked without turning his head, while holding a thick, ancient book. Yes. As a new professor, you have to show your face and let all the students know you. Snape gave an affirmative answer without hesitation. As a very suspicious person, he always felt that the young man in front of him was secretly planning something. So unless it was absolutely necessary, he was unwilling to let him out of his sight. All right, I understand. Zhang Cheng, who had divinity flowing in his body, was very sensitive. Naturally, he was very clear that the mixed blood prince was wary of him. He glanced at him with a faint smile, then raised his hand and lightly snapped his fingers. Ha! Following the crisp sound, his entire body suddenly started to fade and gradually became transparent. Finally, he disappeared into thin air without a trace. Seeing this, Snape's pupils suddenly shrank, and he was stunned on the spot. One must know that Hogwarts had a set of very strong magical defenses. Many teleportation spells, including phantom transference, would not be effective here. But just now, someone actually broke this common sense and completed a teleportation spell without even using a magic wand. It was so easy that it was unbelievable. Out of instinct, he turned around and ran towards the auditorium, wanting to tell Dumbledore this news. At the same time, in the auditorium on the first floor, Zhang Cheng slowly condensed his physical body in front of everyone's eyes. He then sat in his seat and nodded at the surrounding professors with a smile. This move not only stunned the students below, but also the professors could not help but reveal an extremely shocked expression, especially Principal Albus Dumbledore, who immediately turned to the side and lowered his voice to probe. Dear Professor Zhang, can you tell me what method you used just now to be able to avoid the magical defenses of Hogwarts and teleport? Mr. Principal, if you have carefully studied the magical defense system of Hogwarts, you will realize that it is actually not as perfect as described, especially in the aspect of prohibiting teleportation. It only prohibits long-distance positioning, so the Magi cannot determine the destination of their teleportation. But if the positioning target is changed to a person, then the teleportation will not be hindered. Zhang Cheng pretended to be relaxed as he replied, I see. You used Hagrid as the teleportation locator and then slightly staggered the distance. Dumbledore's pupils shone with a brilliant light. It must be known that although this technique was easy to say, it was very difficult to do. At least among the professors present, there were no more than 2 who had the ability to do this. First of all, the spellcaster must be very sensitive to magic and be able to detect the magic fluctuations of someone within a few hundred meters or even a few kilometers. Secondly, the spellcaster must have very precise control ability. Otherwise, if there is a slight mistake in the distance, the spellcaster may be embedded in a wall, pillar, or other places. If it is more serious, the spellcaster may directly hit the person who set the location, and both of them will die together. Finally, and most importantly, the spellcaster must have unparalleled courage and strong self-confidence. The average person would never take such a big risk to save time. That's right. Your understanding and insight of magic is really admirable. If you have spare time, I would be very happy to discuss with you about the loopholes and the magical defenses of Hogwarts. But for now, let's carry out the division ceremony first. Before Zhang Cheng could finish his sentence, the tightly shut door was suddenly pushed open with a bang. Snape barged in, panting and constantly patrolling the surroundings. When he saw Zhang Cheng, he let out a sigh of relief and walked to his seat with a gloomy face. Dumbledore obviously knew what happened between the two of them. He laughed and teased, Be careful, my dear Jean. Severus is not a magnanimous enemy. He will take his revenge sooner or later. It's all right. I like challenges, and I like to play some interesting games to pass the time. Zhang Cheng looked at Snape, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. Snape glared at him fiercely, but did not say anything. Chapter 740. Just as the old saying went, where there are people, there will be conflict. Where there is conflict, there will be the underworld. Although Hogwarts was not big, and there were less than 20 professors, the relationships between them were extremely complicated. Some of them were like fire and water, such as Snape and Lupin, who had just joined the defense of black magic class this year. If there was a chance, Zhang Cheng did not doubt that they would take out their magic wands and cast a vicious death curse on the other party. Apart from that, the battles between the four academies that had lasted for hundreds of years inevitably caused the professors to be biased according to their backgrounds and standpoints. In general, this magic school that was claimed to be the best in England and even Europe was actually filled with intense discrimination and conflicts. If not for the fact that there was a strong principal holding the fort, who knew what would have happened. Even if the school were to split up and disband in the future, no one would be surprised. As a person who was proficient in political tactics, Zhang Cheng did not understand if the four founders, who were boasted to be extremely powerful, had their brains been kicked by a donkey, or were they caught in a door before, to actually come up with such an extremely stupid power structure. One had to know that the most important thing for any organization to grow and expand was to gather all the power that could be gathered, and to continuously expand and forge ahead, until it became a colossus that no one dared to touch. To put it bluntly, it was a centralization of power, to temporarily suppress the various factions within the organization, and make everyone listen to the orders of the leader. But look at what the founders of Hogwarts had done. From the very beginning, they had split the school into 4 different factions, and every faction had such a huge difference in ideology, to the extent that there was a tit-for-tat situation like Gryffindor and Slytherin. Fortunately, the English magic world had not been very successful. Otherwise, if a talented and powerful magus were to pop up and establish a new magic school, it would not take long for the Hogwarts to be defeated and replaced. Of course, whether the Hogwarts or the English magic world was good or bad was insignificant in Zhang Cheng's eyes. After going through the interesting opening ceremony, he once again closed the door and locked himself in the room. No one knew what he was doing inside. Occasionally, students and spirits who passed by would hear strange noises coming from inside, as well as the unsettling silver light. Many students even thought that this new magic practical class professor was a complete weirdo. There was only one exception, and that was Draco Malfoy. However, he didn't explain anything to anyone. He just waited with great anticipation for the arrival of the first magic practical class. About 2 weeks later, Zhang Cheng finally walked out of his room. He wore a thin black robe and appeared in front of the students for the first time. Due to the needs of teaching, he did not choose a spacious auditorium or classroom. Instead, he chose to hold the class on an outdoor lawn. The students were none other than Slytherin Academy and Gryffindor Academy. Looking at the hostile atmosphere between the two sides, a playful smile appeared on his face. He cleared his throat and said loudly, "Quiet. Perhaps some of you know me, but most of you are unfamiliar with me. But that doesn't matter, because what I'm about to give you is the most intense and blood-boiling battle of all the courses. Fight, fight." Hermione Granger couldn't help but cry out. Looking at the girl's slightly immature face, Zhang Cheng smiled and nodded. "That's right. Battle. A real battle. Not the dueling club that you played in last semester. In this course, you may get hurt and experience all kinds of pain and suffering. But I guarantee that as long as you persevere, you will definitely become stronger. Also, if anyone is afraid, you can quit now. This is not a compulsory course, and it will not affect your final results." "PR Professor, will people die?" Ron raised his hand and asked cautiously. "Die? No, they won't. At most, they'll bleed a little and break a few bones. If you want to know more, you can ask Draco. He is very clear about my teaching methods." After saying that, Zhang Cheng gave Junior Malfoy a look. The latter didn't say anything else and pulled open his collar, revealing a 3-centimeter-long scar that had just healed not long ago. He sneered and provoked. "Do you see? Weasley, this is the injury that I received during my training. If you're timid and afraid, then get lost quickly. Professor's training is not prepared for trash. Afraid? I'm not afraid, Ron retorted with a red face and a stern voice. As everyone knew, 12 or 13-year-old children, especially boys, usually valued their face more than anything else. Some of the braver ones would even do some dangerous and stupid things. So, when provoked by the person he hated the most, he immediately reacted subconsciously. Very good. I look forward to your performance. I hope you and Potter won't be scared to tears. As far as I know, he seemed to have fainted from the fear of the Dementors on the train, right? Draco cracked a sarcastic smile. He knew how difficult the actual combat training was, and he himself almost couldn't persevere. Even if it was a public school class, the intensity might be reduced a lot, but it was definitely not something that a group of pampered students could endure. Malfoy, that's enough. Zhang Cheng decisively stopped Draco's actions, because he had already seen that Albus Dumbledore, the young Zhang of the Hogwarts, was already standing on the high windowsill, looking down at the lawn with a few professors by his side. As you wish, Professor. Young Malfoy placed one hand on his chest and elegantly made a noble's bow. After resolving the small conflict between the two, Zhang Cheng directly opened his arms and raised the supreme authority in his hand, which was disguised as a magic wand. In an instant, hundreds of illusions formed completely by energy were created on the field. Oh my God. Too powerful. Unbelievable. Is this Professor's strength? For a moment, every student involuntarily let out exclamations and screams. The scene looked extremely chaotic. In contrast, Dumbledore, who was standing on the high balcony of the castle, revealed a rare smile and said without turning his head, "How is it? I was right, wasn't I? A magus with this level of spellcasting ability will not bow down to anyone. I agree that he is an abnormally powerful magus, but I have my reservations on whether he is in contact with the Dark Lord." Snape replied with a gloomy face. Caution is a precious quality, but it is not good to be overly suspicious. Don't worry, I don't feel any strong ambition or desire from him. He's not the same type of person as Tom, at least not now. After saying this meaningful sentence, Dumbledore turned around and walked in the direction of the headmaster's office. No one knew what was in his mind at this moment, and no one knew what he would do next. Chapter 741. Silence. Everyone remained silent. After 2 consecutive shouts, Zhang Cheng found that not only did the students not quiet down, but the situation was getting more and more out of hand. Especially the senior female students. There were even 2 or 3 brave ones who tried to rush over and take advantage of the chaos. Helplessly, he could only inject a trace of energy to induce a strong resonance between the supreme, heavenly God and the surrounding air. Instantly, squeak! A hair-raising, ear-piercing sound reverberated in the air above the lawn. Everyone who heard the sound involuntarily stopped what they were doing and covered their ears with a pained expression on their faces. As everyone knew, humans were actually very sensitive to noise, especially sound with special frequencies, which could make a person lose their ability to fight and become a lamb waiting to be slaughtered in just a few seconds. Seeing that the chaotic scene was suppressed, Zhang Cheng immediately canceled the noise made by the supreme heavenly God and warned expressionlessly, "Remember, this is the first time, and I hope it will be the last. If anyone dares to break the discipline of the class again, I guarantee that he or she will pay a painful price. Now, Draco, come up and demonstrate to everyone what actual combat training is." "It's my pleasure, Professor." Young Malfoy proudly took 2 steps forward and stood in front of the illusion he was most familiar with. He clenched his wand tightly and bowed slightly. The illusion also bowed in return. The moment the illusion stood up, he immediately shouted at the top of his lungs, "Electric tremor!" Suddenly, a dazzling white electric light shot out from the end of the wand. But who would have thought that the illusion's reaction was even faster? It immediately covered itself with a layer of magical protection and began to counterattack unhurriedly. Compared to Draco's precise, efficient, and reckless offensive strategy, The illusion was undoubtedly more comprehensive. Whether it was defense or offense, it could take care of both sides. It did not take long for the illusion to gain the upper hand and beat Draco into a sorry state. Some parts of the illusion were even injured, and it looked exceptionally glaring with blood. As for the spectating students, they were already stunned. They did not dare to believe that with young Malfoy's spellcasting skills, there was not even the slightest hope of victory. But just when everyone thought that this battle was destined to be won by the illusion, Draco's eyes suddenly revealed an incomparably ferocious look as he rushed towards the blazing fireball. Using his own flesh and blood to withstand the high temperature of hundreds of degrees Celsius, he rushed forward and shot out a fatal ice arrow, directly shattering the illusion and winning the final victory. The whole process happened so quickly and unexpectedly that when he struggled to get up from the ground, everyone forgot to cheer and cheer. Just as the lawn fell into an eerie silence, Zhang Chung suddenly took the lead to applaud. As he applauded, he commented, "Mr. Malfoy did well. He had an excellent sense of timing and understood the importance of seizing the initiative. At the same time, he also knew how to seize the opportunity to turn defeat into victory. A battle, especially one between adepts, usually only takes a second to decide the victor. That is why I ask everyone involved to maintain a high degree of concentration." "Professor," Draco was still bleeding. "Don't you need to send him to receive treatment?" A Slytherin girl reminded him in a low voice, her face red. "Haha, with me here, there's no need to worry about minor injuries." Zhang Chung smiled as he released a dazzling golden holy light. In less than a second, the wounds on Malfoy's body completely disappeared, and even the torn robe on his body was restored to its original state. There was no doubt that this outstanding healing and recovery spell instilled confidence in many students who had originally wanted to give up. In the end, less than a third of the students chose to give up on this course, while the remaining 2/3 were eager to try and fight the illusions scattered on the lawn. The courage of these young magi made Zhang Chung feel somewhat surprised. He had originally thought that at most a third of them would be able to stay. In particular, Ron's twin brothers didn't seem to take the injury seriously at all. Without waiting for permission, they took the initiative to find two illusions that didn't look easy to deal with and started a 2-on-2 melee battle. The result was needless to say. In less than a minute, the two brothers were cut open by the air blades and finally fell to the ground, screaming like pigs being slaughtered. "Heavens! Professor, I need treatment. I'm bleeding," George shouted at the top of his lungs. "My leg! Damn it! It must be broken now." Fred also shouted for help, not to be outdone. Looking at the miserable state of this pair of clowns, Zhang Chung couldn't help but sigh and ask, "Before I start the treatment, I want to confirm one thing. Have you fully realized the mistakes you've made?" "Yes, Professor. We swear." "Yes, we swear." The twins gave their word at the same time. They had suffered greatly this time. "I hope so. Gryffindor will deduct 20 points." After saying this, Zhang Chunkai healed the wounds of the two. He turned around and said to the remaining students, "I hope you understand that this is not the game that many people think it is. Every attack of the illusion will cause real damage to you, so you have to take it seriously. Treat this as a battle of life and death that will determine your fate. Only then will you have a chance to defeat the illusions. In addition, since you don't know too many offensive spells at the moment, I will give each of you a spell manual. It records some of the non-lethal but rather effective offensive and defensive spells that I invented. You will teach us new spells." Harry Potter's eyes lit up, revealing an extremely excited and expectant gaze. Although he was already a third-year student, he did not know many spells so far, not to mention offensive spells that were strictly controlled by the Ministry of Magic. Of course, considering your age, the power of these spells will not be too strong, but it is enough to make an adult lose their mobility. It is very suitable for self-defense. Don't worry, I've already asked for Headmaster Dumbledore's opinion. He said that as long as the Ministry of Magic does not interfere, I can continue teaching. Here, this is your copy. Don't forget to practice diligently." Zhang Cheng smiled meaningfully as he took out a small booklet from the table beside him and handed it to the savior. Thank you. Oh yes, you know Draco before? Harry took the booklet and raised his head to ask curiously. That's right. Before I accepted the headmaster's invitation, I was Malfoy's private tutor. He is a very talented young man, especially in the aspect of willpower. He is far more outstanding than most of his peers, Zhang Qing admitted openly in front of everyone. I see. Then, do you have a way to make me as strong as him? Haha, of course. But my training is quite tough. Are you sure you can persevere? I can. Chapter 742. Amidst the screams and wails of the students, the first practical magic class finally came to a successful conclusion. Apart from Draco, the rest of the students could not even hold on for more than a minute, let alone defeat the illusion. However, this did not dampen their enthusiasm for learning battle techniques, especially the new spells recorded in the booklet, which gave everyone a strong sense of novelty and excitement, to the point that they forgot the fact that they were being tortured by their opponents the entire class. After Zhang Cheng announced the end of the class, the Iron Triangle immediately gathered together and discussed what had just happened. Damn it, I feel that Headmaster Dumbledore is crazy. He actually invited Malfoy's private tutor to teach us. Ron complained softly as he massaged his sore shoulders. Although magic had healed most of the wounds, the psychological effects were not something that could be eliminated in a short time. I also feel that this class is a little dangerous, but it is undeniable that as long as we persevere, we will definitely reap great rewards. Look at Draco. He is probably more powerful than the three of us combined. Hermione expressed her opinion in a serious tone. That's right. As long as I can become stronger, a little injury is nothing. Whether you are willing to continue or not, I will not give up. Harry Potter's eyes shone with anticipation. If there was anyone in the British magic world who was most eager to prove himself, it would be none other than Harry Potter. As someone who had inexplicably become a celebrity, the moment he stepped into the magic circle, he wanted to obtain the strength to match his fame more than anyone else. He did not want to be ridiculed by others who used his background to mock him. In fact, Harry Potter, who had grown up under oppression and discrimination, had a darker side in his heart than most of his peers. His ambition and desire were also much stronger. What Zhang Cheng did was to use some guidance and hints to stimulate the darker side of his personality and see if the final result would be different. After all, the pursuit of power was the subconscious desire of every magus. Even the greatest light magi could not stop a young man from working hard to obtain power that belonged to him. It was just that until now, no one had noticed his sinister intentions. Back in the room, Zhang Cheng did not rush to affect Harry's thinking. He just opened a palm-sized crystal bottle placed on the table and injected a small part of the power of creation into it to store it. After doing all this, he pursed his lips and asked with a smile, "D.O.B. Tell me, what did the Savior do after class?" "Great Master, Harry Potter seems to like your class very much, and he told his two friends that he wouldn't give it up anyway." The house elf, whose body had been cruelly modified, walked out from a dark corner and reported in a low voice. Just as I expected. Continue to keep an eye on him, and when necessary, give him some temptation. I believe you understand what I mean." Zhang Cheng hinted meaningfully. Dobby understands. Dobby will make Harry Potter addicted to power. The house elf bowed deeply with one hand on her chest. Very good. Remember, be careful. Don't be discovered by the other students and professors. 13 or 14-year-old boys always like to fantasize and stubbornly believe that they are the most special in the world. You should use this to your advantage. After saying that, Zhang Cheng waved his hand lightly, indicating that she could leave. "Master, please rest assured, I won't be discovered by anyone." Dobby's eyes flashed with a sinister light. She raised her hand and snapped her fingers and instantly disappeared without a trace. As the principal, Dumbledore would probably never know that the Hogwarts, which he thought had strong magical defenses, had long been infiltrated. Not long after the house elf left, the supreme god suddenly asked, "Master, you seem to be very interested in that boy with the glasses?" "Interested? No, I just feel a little bored and want to find some entertainment for myself. Zhang Cheng sat down and lightly tapped on the table. You know what? The most interesting thing in this world is to personally kill someone's last hope and see their pained and desperate faces. I don't like Albus Dumbledore, and even more so, I don't like the ideals he promotes. No matter if it's a wizard or a normal person, everyone should be in a state of intense competition and not be able to live a comfortable life without doing anything. I think so too, but I really can't see what's so special about that boy, apart from the soul fragment and a lightning-shaped scar on his head. The Supreme God obviously didn't quite approve of the identity of the Savior, and even had a slightly contemptuous and disdainful attitude. Special? He's not special at all. He's just a chess piece pushed to the forefront and controlled, Zhang Cheng explained with a sneer. As the main character throughout the story, Harry Potter was actually just a bait that Dumbledore deliberately created to attract Voldemort's attention, and he couldn't escape from his control until the end. It had to be said that this kind of life was a little sad, so he wanted to do a little damage. Then what next? Don't tell me you plan to waste all your time on a boy. No, of course not. Didn't you see that I've been storing the power of creation? Next, I'll use the students to do a large-scale experiment and see how many changes this thing can produce. As he said this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a chilling madness. Yes, this was his real purpose for coming to Hogwarts as a professor. In the entire British magic world, what could be easier to find hundreds and thousands of wizards as experimental subjects than Hogwarts? As dinner time approached, Zhang Cheng quietly sneaked into the kitchen, and while the house elves weren't paying attention, he mixed the power of creation into various kinds of fruit juices and pumpkin juice. In the end, when these added things were served on the dining table, no one at all noticed that something was wrong. Even the famous Dumbledore was no exception. Right now, the whole Hogwarts could be said to have become a huge testing ground, including the initiator, Zhang Cheng. No one knew what would happen, whether it would lead to a terrible disaster. The only thing he knew was that anyone who drank the fruit juice would undergo a mutation in a short period of time. In order to better obtain the test data, he even took hundreds of blood samples overnight to save. Just as Zhang Cheng finished all this and returned to his room, an ear-piercing scream suddenly rang out in the silent castle, and then all the students and professors panicked. Needless to say, Sirius Black had finally snuck in, looking for his enemy while looking for his godson. Chapter 743. It had to be said that Sirius Black was not a very smart guy. Not only did his approach not have any effect, but it also angered the bureaucrats of the Ministry of Magic, which made them even more determined to keep the Dementors. Most importantly, after learning the so-called truth of his parents' deaths, he had completely fallen into a frenzy to avenge his parents. Almost as soon as he had time, he would run to Zhang Cheng's office and ask for advice on all kinds of spellcasting techniques and offensive spells. Not long after, his strength began to improve by leaps and bounds, and he was almost on par with Draco. After all, Draco had started training a whole semester earlier than Sirius, which showed his talent and hard work. Of course, the price was that he suffered terrible external injuries almost every day. He would only go back to bed to rest when he was exhausted, so he did not have time to maintain his relationship with his two friends. His personality also became more and more gloomy, and he was less and less willing to talk to others. Not to mention Hermione and Ron. Even Dumbledore could not do anything about this change. After all, the hatred of killing one's parents was not something that could be resolved by talking. Even in a modern legal society, many people would choose the most direct and impulsive way to make the murderer pay for his actions. Professor, can you teach me a death curse that can really kill my enemies? After a day of classes, Harry Potter came to the office alone and stared into Zhang Cheng's eyes. Why are you suddenly asking this? Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and looked at the boy with interest. He could feel that the boy's emotions, mental state were all at a very dangerous critical point. If he crossed it, he would forever bid farewell to the original protagonist and become a new Harry Potter. I want revenge. I want the enemy who betrayed my parents to pay the price. Harry did not try to hide anything, nor did he intend to hide anything. As a sensitive boy, he could feel that the professor in front of him was different from all the other professors in the school. As for what was different, he could not tell for the time being. He only felt that the professor was willing to help him, unlike the other professors who forced him to give up the idea of revenge. Revenge. Zhang Cheng shook his head with a faint smile. You don't seem to have figured out who your real enemy is, do you? I don't understand. Didn't the newspaper say that Sirius Black betrayed my parents, and that was why they were killed by Voldemort? Harry frowned and gritted his teeth. Sorry, I can't tell you the truth directly, but I can give you 3 small suggestions. First of all, nothing is as simple as it seems on the surface. There may be many secrets and secrets that you don't know about behind the scenes. Secondly, never believe in newspapers, magazines, or what comes out of people's mouths, because you can't be sure what is true, what is exaggerated, and what is deliberately said to deceive and mislead you. Lastly, and most importantly, never be blinded by hatred. Even if you want to kill someone, you have to think clearly about why you want to kill him. Once he dies, who will gain the most benefits? Although Zhang Cheng did not give a direct answer, his words were full of hints. He was not stupid enough to directly interfere with the actions of the Savior. Instead, he planned to let the other party slowly investigate and embrace the darkness to become a person like himself. As for why he did this, the answer was simple. Compared to those who stood on the moral high ground and criticized others, he preferred those who acted to achieve their goals at all costs. You mean, Sirius Black isn't the murderer of my parents? Harry was obviously not a complete fool. He immediately understood the meaning of the words. Haha, this depends on you to find the answer. I think you should first find Black and then talk to him face to face. Who knows, you might find something unexpected. As for the death curse, I won't teach it to you. That would mean that it would violate the laws of the Ministry of Magic. But I am a careless person, and occasionally I would leave some dangerous spell books on the table. It would be terrible if a student flipped through them. After saying this, Zhang Cheng patted a red notebook on the table, and then pretended to stand up and walk towards the bathroom. When he brushed past the boy, he did not forget to stretch out 3 fingers. Harry immediately realized that this meant that he had 30 minutes, and immediately rushed to flip through the contents of the red notebook. He did not know until he read it, but when he did, he was shocked. Inside, there were densely packed records of high-level spells that could kill or maim people. Some of them, once released, could instantly kill everyone on the street. Panic, fear, trembling. He could not imagine how a professor could have so many terrifying and lethal spells that were strictly forbidden by the Ministry of Magic. But after a short moment of panic, he quickly calmed down and realized that this was a golden opportunity. He opened his eyes wide and used his brain to quickly record the spells. Half an hour passed in the blink of an eye. When Zhang Cheng came out of the bathroom, Harry hurriedly closed the notebook and bowed deeply. Thank you very much, Professor. I swear that one day I will repay your kindness. Repay? No, Potter, I don't need any repayment. As long as you can wake up to yourself and not be used by others, I will be thankful. Zhang Cheng picked up the notebook and threw it into the fireplace, letting the flames burn it to ashes. No one can use me, and no one can order me to do what I should do. What I shouldn't do, Harry Potter promised resolutely. Recently, he had enough of the advice and education from his friends and elders, and he had enough of being pointed at by others. This time, he wanted to use the blood and death of his enemies to prove that he had grown up, that he had enough power, and that he no longer needed protection and sympathy. Watching the boy leave the office, Zhang Cheng slightly raised the corner of his mouth and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear. The seed of darkness has taken root and sprouted. Tell me, dear Albus Dumbledore, what will you choose? Once and for all, get rid of Harry Potter, who may become the next the Dark Lord, or use him to get rid of Voldemort first, or let the 2 of them die together. Without a doubt, nothing would make him happier than tearing off a sanctimonious mask of hypocrisy. As for whether the entire British magic world would be in turmoil and blood would flow like a river, that was none of his business. Chapter 744. Abandoning the past and embracing the dark side of human nature was never something that could be accomplished overnight. It required a long period of accumulation and process. Therefore, after the seed of darkness had taken root and sprouted, and Yang did not have too much contact with Harry Potter, nor did he attempt to influence or manipulate his actions. Instead, he gave this job to Dobby, the house elf who had undergone terrible modifications. Late at night, all the students and professors in Hogwarts had fallen asleep. With the help of the invisibility cloak, Harry quietly slipped into a room filled with training dummies. This was none other than the famous room for all requests. Dobby, who had been waiting for a long time, came out from a dark corner. She bowed deeply and said, "Great Harry Potter, your humble servant is honored to be of service to you." "Cut the crap. I need training. More training." Harry quickly took off the invisibility cloak and threw it aside. He pulled out his wand, his eyes flashing with a cold light. "As you wish." Dobby raised her hand and snapped her fingers. Pa! In an instant, one of the dummies came to life and slowly turned into the appearance of Sirius Black in a newspaper. He raised his wand and shot out a terrible death curse. "Shatter. Armor." Harry was obviously used to this kind of high-intensity magic confrontation. He did not hesitate to cast a defensive spell on himself. After being taught by Zhang Cheng, he had long understood that compared to powerful offensive magic, defensive magic was more important. As long as he had defensive magic on him, he would be invincible. He could then slowly think about how to defeat a powerful enemy. However, if he did not have a defensive spell, even if he was hit by a low-level spell, he could be defeated. The two of them went back and forth like this for a few minutes. In the end, with a more powerful and more deadly spell, Harry finally defeated the dummy and restored it to its original appearance. However, he was not much better. His whole body was soaked in sweat. His chest was heaving up and down violently as he panted heavily. It was obvious that he had severely overused his magic. There was no other way. No matter what, he was only a teenager and was still a child. The level of magic stored in his body could not be compared to that of an adult magus. Especially when casting some powerful spells, it would even cause strong discomfort, such as dizziness, nausea, vomiting, and so on. But for some reason, this situation had become less and less frequent recently. At the same time, something seemed to have taken root and sprouted in his body. Without a doubt, Harry Potter, who was lacking in knowledge, didn't know what had happened to him. However, he felt that as long as he could become stronger, there was nothing wrong with it. After resting for half an hour, he defeated another dummy. Then he put on the invisibility cloak and returned to Gryffindor's lounge. He did not realize that there was a pair of beautiful eyes staring at him. Early the next morning, the owner of the pair of eyes barged into the lounge and said hesitantly, Professor, may I have a chat with you?" "Of course. Please go ahead, Miss Granger." Zhang Qing put down his work and turned around with a smile. "It's Harry. I noticed that he always sneaks out alone in the middle of the night. I don't know what he's doing." Hermione carefully told him about her observations. She had to admit that the Savior's recent behavior was a little worrying. She even felt that the friend she was once familiar with had become a different person. Sneaking out in the middle of the night? It sounds like a lot of rebellious boys have done similar things. "I don't think it's a big deal." Zhang Cheng pretended to think for a few seconds and shook his head immediately. As one of the key observation targets, the boy's physical and psychological changes were all under his supervision, including some interesting reactions induced by the power of creation. In fact, ever since he decided to start a large-scale experiment, he had received many surprising results. Among them, the power of creation in Harry Potter's body had brought about the most drastic changes. Driven by hatred and an extreme desire for power, his magic power grew at an alarming rate. At this rate, Luo Ao from the Ministry of Magic would have to stand aside in a year's time. It was obvious that the power of creation was something that was easily affected by strong emotions and desires. As for how it was affected, Zhang Cheng hadn't summed up the corresponding experience and rules for the time being. Hermione obviously didn't know that the young professor standing in front of her had done such a terrible thing. She explained to herself, he didn't just sneak out, but it looked like he had a fight with someone. "I feel that he's becoming more and more distant from the friend around him. No, Miss Granger, I feel that this is a sign of maturity. People always needed to have their own privacy. Not everything could be taken out and shared with friends. Of course, if your relationship with Potter surpasses the level of friendship, I can help you ask him what he thinks. Speaking up to here, Zhang Cheng's lips curled up, revealing a smile full of ambiguity and playfulness. The girl suddenly blushed and hurriedly waved her hands. No, you misunderstand. We're just ordinary friends. Really? Why do I feel that your concern for him goes beyond the level of ordinary friends? Forget it. This isn't something I should be concerned about. However, I still know why Harry sneaks out at night. Yes. As far as I know, he went out alone to practice spells, so you don't have to worry too much. After teasing her a little, Zhang Cheng finally reluctantly gave an answer. This was because he knew that Harry Potter's abnormal behavior was not only the concern of these students, but more importantly, the principal of Hogwarts, Dumbledore, was also concerned. Practice spells. Hermione frowned subconsciously. Yes, Harry hates himself for being weak and yearns to become strong. He came to me a few times before, begging me to teach him the techniques and methods to defeat his enemies. Zhang Cheng didn't try to hide anything and openly admitted the fact that he had taught the boy before. Thank you very much, Professor. I think I understand. Hermione nodded her head as if she didn't fully understand. She turned around and ran away in fright, disappearing at the end of the corridor. Watching the girl gradually disappear into the distance, Zhang Cheng meaningfully asked the Supreme God, "Guess, how will Dumbledore react when he hears this news?" I guarantee that the old guy will stop Harry Potter's revenge plan at all costs. Who knows, maybe there will be an irreparable gap between the two of them, or even resentment. That's right, my plan has succeeded. The current Harry will never be able to return to his former self. I believe that the old guy will be very angry and sad. Chapter 745. Damn it, I knew this fellow was up to no good. Look at what he has done. He actually instigated the stupid Potter to learn so many dangerous spells. Snape stood in front of the desk in the principal's office and shouted crazily. Due to the fact that Zhang Cheng had played a trick on this master potion during the opening ceremony, the relationship between the two had not been good. To be exact, he had been looking for trouble in various ways, trying to kick Zhang Cheng out of the teaching team of Hogwarts. Unfortunately, this idea did not receive the approval of the principal. Dumbledore ignored Snape's violent reaction. He adjusted his glasses and asked the silent Maleva McGonagall, "Tell me, what has Potter been doing recently? Is he planning to avenge his parents?" "Yes, even a blind person can see what he is thinking. Albus, I think there is something wrong with his mind. He is becoming more and more like someone. You better think of a solution quickly." Maleva McGonagall warned with a serious expression. As an old person who had witnessed the rise of Voldemort, she knew better than anyone else how similar Harry Potter was to the young Tom. Especially their extreme desire for power. It was almost to the point of morbidity. If they walked any further, they would fall into a bottomless abyss. "Have you talked to him?" Dumbledore's expression gradually became serious. "Yes, I have, but there was no effect. The matter of Sirius Black escaping from prison was like a fuse, causing him to release all the resentment that had been accumulated in his heart for many years. I believe you should know how much he has suffered all these years. It is not something that can be solved by talking." Maleva McGonagall shook her head tiredly. "I understand. You all can go back and rest." Dumbledore waved his hand gently, not revealing his thoughts from the beginning to the end. Although Snape was dissatisfied and wanted to argue, he held it in and left the principal's office angrily. After everyone had left, the old man stood up and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Potter should not have become like this." Who was the one behind all this? Zhang, or Tom's subordinate? Just as he finished speaking, he immediately asked the portraits of the past principals hanging on the wall, "Does anyone know anything suspicious about the magic practice professor I invited back this semester?" No, other than occasionally teaching students who come to him for guidance. He basically stays in his room all day long and conducts some strange research. A person in the portrait answered without hesitation. "Research? What research?" Dumbledore seemed to notice something was wrong and frowned subconsciously. I don't know. His understanding and research of magic is far above ours. Even the new spells he taught his students are not something ordinary adepts can understand. I heard that Lucius is planning on pressuring the Ministry of Magic to give him the corresponding honor. The portrait clearly knew what the current headmaster wanted to know, so it told him everything it knew. Many people mistakenly believed that the ghosts wandering around the Hogwarts and the moving magic portraits hanging on the walls were just dispensable decorations. But in fact, they were not only used to monitor and control the school, they were also a set of warning systems. In particular, the portraits that did not need to rest were scattered in almost every corner of the castle. Even if someone successfully broke into the Hogwarts, it would be difficult to escape their eyes. It could be said that from the moment Harry Potter and his friends entered the school, every secret action that they thought they had not been discovered was actually under the headmaster's strict surveillance. Even if they encountered danger several times, it was no exception. Dumbledore stroked his white beard and pondered for a long time. Finally, he continued to ask in an uncertain tone, "Then I asked you to investigate his identity. Any results?" "Sorry, no. Whether it is the world of ordinary people or the world of magic in the East, there are no traces of his existence." The portrait bluntly gave a negative answer. Unbelievable. No identity, no signs of existence. Could it be that he appeared out of thin air? I don't know if he appeared out of thin air, but I do know that he is more dangerous than he looks. You'd better not let your guard down. Continue to watch him for me. If there are any abnormalities, be sure to inform me immediately. Understood. Just as the headmaster's office fell into silence, Lucius, who was in the Malfoy Manor, had just received an anonymous letter from an unknown person. His whole body involuntarily trembled slightly. This was because there was no content on the letter, only a constantly shaking skull pattern that emitted a dark green light. That's right. This was not some scary prank, but the famous dark demonic mark. As a former member of the Death Eaters, he naturally recognized this pattern that caused countless people to feel fear. He came back in the end. After a full 10 minutes, Lucius spat out these words from his mouth. Without asking, he knew that this letter was just a notice, informing him to be prepared to serve the Dark Lord at any time. But at this moment, he, who was scheming to control the Ministry of Magic and make the Malfoy family the masters of the British magic world, did not want the Dark Lord to return at all. After all, compared to Voldemort's tyrannical style of "those who obey me will prosper, and those who oppose me will perish," he gradually began to like Zhang Cheng's conciliatory strategy of quietly hiding behind the scenes to control everything, rather than foolishly rushing to the front and becoming the target of public criticism. Unfortunately, Lucius did not think that he had enough strength to resist the summons of his former master. So after hesitating for a moment, he resolutely cast Phantom Transference and arrived near a dense forest. Just as he was looking around the surroundings, an extremely gloomy voice suddenly echoed in his ears. "Ah, my loyal servant has finally heeded the summons and appeared. Moss, Master." Lucius could not help but shiver and hurriedly kneel on one knee to express his respect, even though he did not know where the Dark Lord was hiding or if he had really recovered his strength. "My servant, tell me, why did you not come to find me and help me all these years?" Voldemort's voice revealed a trace of hatred. "I'm sorry, Master. Dumbledore and his minions have been tracking and suppressing the Death Eaters, so we have to lie low and not dare to act rashly," Lucius explained in a trembling voice. Chapter 746. Without a doubt, Lucius Malfoy did not dare to disobey Voldemort's orders, even though the Dark Lord was now extremely weak and could be killed by his enemies at any time. Without any hesitation, after returning to the manor, he immediately wrote a letter and mailed it to his son, Draco, who then passed it on to Zhang Cheng. The reason why he did this was mainly because he was afraid that the letter would be intercepted by some people with ulterior motives. After all, a father writing a letter to his son would not attract too much attention. However, if he wrote to a professor working at the Hogwarts, many people, including Dumbledore, would be very vigilant. About a day later, Zhang Cheng received the letter written in invisible ink. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and he muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "What is this? An invitation letter? Or is it some self-righteous fellow who thinks he can control me like he controls other idiots? Master, I think this is more like a request for help. You should know that his current situation is not very good. He can't even be considered alive in the strict sense." The supreme god sneered and expressed his opinion. For a divine artifact that was truly integrated with countless powerful forces, it did not take the magi of this world seriously. Regardless of whether it was Dumbledore or Voldemort, who ordinary magi did not even dare to mention his name. They were essentially far from transcending the boundaries of mortals. Although the latter had comprehended some of the laws of death and used it to create these crooked little things like soul artifacts, mortals were still mortals. Not to mention the incomparably powerful gods. Even many extraordinaries could easily kill them. Request for help. It sounds interesting. However, I doubt that in his current state, he would have the guts to come out and meet me. Zhang Cheng had a playful expression as he teased. Ha ha! As long as he is not a lunatic or a fool, he would definitely not be stupid enough to directly appear in front of you. That would be no different from sending himself to his death. If I were him, I would choose to hide in a safe place and have his conversation through a spell or medium. The supreme god undoubtedly understood the character of its creator very well and let out a piercing laugh. That's right. If he dares to appear in front of me, I will strip his soul without hesitation and read everything I want from it. After saying that, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a cold light. According to the coordinates provided on the letter, he raised his hand and snapped his fingers. Ha! In the next second, he appeared directly in the deepest part of the dense forest. Other than the tall trees around him, there was only a huge floor-to-ceiling mirror, which made him seem out of place. It was obvious that this mirror was a medium that the other party had deliberately left behind to communicate. As a powerful spellcaster who could turn the entire British magic world upside down, Voldemort's IQ was not too bad. He understood that he could not take any risks in his current state. Looking at the ripples that kept emerging in the mirror, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but smile and bow. He took the initiative to greet, "Good afternoon, Your Excellency." "Greetings, mysterious wizard from the East." Voldemort's half-dead appearance gradually appeared through the mirror. It had to be said that he was really a bit miserable at the moment. He was barely hanging on by occupying the body of a creature in a half-soul state. Not only was his strength weakened to the extreme, but he also had to change his body every once in a while. The two of them did not say a word as they looked at each other's eyes through the medium. After a full 5 minutes, Zhang Cheng broke the silence with a smile. "May I ask why you summoned me here? Or in another way, is there anything I can help you with?" "Don't worry, my dear friend. Before we talk about cooperation, I think we should get to know each other a little. According to the information I received, you seem to be conducting some interesting experiments on life, right?" Voldemort asked meaningfully. There was no need to ask to know that when he met Lucius previously, he had most likely used a spell like mind extraction. "Yes, I'm trying to reach into the realm of the gods and create a brand new intelligent life form from nothing. Of course, it's too difficult to do this at the current stage, so I intend to start by modifying it." "Why? Are you interested in this topic as well?" Zhang Cheng did not try to deny it and openly admitted it. "Creating life. What a great undertaking. How can I not be interested? I invited you here because I want you to help me create a stronger and more perfect body," Voldemort replied in an impassioned voice. As a master of black magic, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to modify the human body. In particular, the body modification techniques of wizards had been completely lost hundreds of years ago. If he could have a powerful modified body, it wouldn't be too difficult to defeat Dumbledore. "Oh, then I'm afraid you'll have to wait for a while. With the techniques I currently have, I'm unable to meet your requirement for the time being." Zhang Cheng pretended to helplessly spread out his hands and put on a look of helplessness. "It doesn't matter. I've always been patient. You can slowly carry out your own research. Also, I heard that you accepted Dumbledore's invitation to teach in Hogwarts." Tell me, what do you think of his philosophy? When he asked this question, Voldemort cracked a sarcastic smile. It's boring and uninteresting. Are you satisfied with this answer? Zhang Cheng replied meaningfully. Looks like it's exactly as I imagined. You're not the same kind of person as him. I wonder if I have the honor of inviting you to join us and create the future of the magic world together? Voldemort took the initiative to extend his right hand. Zhang Cheng pretended to hesitate for a few seconds before nodding cheerfully. Joining is not a problem, but I have a small additional condition. Please speak. I want all the knowledge related to making soul tools. Soul tools. Voldemort's eyes flashed with surprise and vigilance, but soon he laughed happily. I can agree to your condition, but you have to create a perfect body for me in return. Deal. I wish us a happy cooperation. After getting the promise he wanted, Zhang Cheng immediately put his right hand into the mirror without hesitation and shook hands with the cold and pale hand of a dead person. Happy cooperation. I believe that you and I will become the most perfect partners. Voldemort's eyes flashed with a terrifying red light. According to his inherent understanding, anyone who wanted to obtain the method of making soul tools was essentially the same as him. In their bones, they pursued great power and near-eternal life. They were natural enemies of Albus Dumbledore. But the Dark Lord didn't know that Zhang Cheng wasn't interested in making soul tools, but the secret of fusing one's soul with the law of death. Once he obtained this secret, his attitude would change 180 degrees, and he would directly stab him in the back. Betraying an ally was as easy as eating and drinking for him. He didn't have the slightest bit of psychological burden. One had to know that allies were used to betray from the beginning. It was just a matter of whether the price and timing were right. Calm. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 747. How was it? How did the discussion go? Once Zhang Cheng returned to Malfoy Manor, Lucius quickly stood up and asked anxiously. After all, this meeting was equivalent to deciding the life and death of the Malfoy family. Regardless of which side was dissatisfied, he could possibly be annihilated. Don't worry, I've already reached a cooperation agreement with Lord Voldemort. From now on, I'm his close ally. As for you, I believe you won't mind having the Malfoy family change their allegiance. Zhang Cheng comforted him with a smile. That's great. This is the best news I've heard in recent years, bar none. Lucius heaved a sigh of relief and gradually relaxed his taut nerves. Those who had never been in a whirlpool of storms would never be able to imagine how weak and helpless ordinary people were in the face of extremely powerful forces. Even the slightest ripple would cause one to be smashed to pieces. Even though Malfoy was a noble with a long history and considerable influence, and his spellcasting abilities were not bad, he was still unable to contend against the most elite magi. The most classic example was when Voldemort rose to power and massacred the Magi families that were unwilling to submit to him. Not a single family was spared, except for the boy who survived the calamity. Zhang Cheng clearly knew what was going on in the other party's mind. He picked up the teapot and poured himself a cup of hot tea. After that, he took a small sip and said without turning his head, "Do you know what will happen next?" "Yes. That lord will return from death and set off a reign of terror in the magical world." Lucius answered without hesitation. To be precise, any magus who had a little understanding of Voldemort would understand that he would never give up on his insane ambitions. Instead, he would use slaughter and death to announce his return. That's right. Then do you know what the Malfoy family should do next? Zhang Cheng asked with a faint smile. This time, Lucius clearly hesitated and shook his head with a wry smile. No, I don't know. Please instruct me. Also, do I still need to continue with the infiltration plan of the Ministry of Magic? Of course. Although chaos and disorder were the ultimate form of all things in the universe, human society was a collection of order. Even the evilest person would establish a set of rules to maintain their rule. Thus, to a certain extent, the Ministry of Magic represented the order of the sorcerer world. If you controlled it, it was equivalent to controlling the order. No matter how the world changed in the future, as long as you chose your side carefully, you could maintain a relatively high status. Moreover, I have many plans that require the assistance of the Ministry of Magic. They are very, very interesting plans." As he blurted out the last word, Zhang Cheng's eyes revealed undisguised malice. He didn't want the future story to be the same as the original story, where Dumbledore and his followers stayed in the Hogwarts and did whatever they wanted. He planned to clean up all these guys next year and make the school a place to cultivate real wizards instead of a group of cowards who could only tremble in fear in the face of danger. That was right. In his eyes, 3/4 of the graduates from Hogwarts were unqualified. Inferior spellcasters like these would be mercilessly eliminated even in the relatively mild Azeroth, let alone the Faerun continent, where the death rate of apprentices was more than 70%. Why was the status of spellcasters far higher than other professions in most magical worlds? The answer was simple. Usually, to become a qualified spellcaster, talent, perseverance, and perseverance were all indispensable. They were truly 1 in 1,000, 1 in 10,000 talents, the elites of the elites. But what about Hogwarts? Rather than calling it a magic school, it was better to call it a vocational and technical training center. Most of the people it cultivated were not worthy of being called spellcasters and were only skilled workers who knew a little about magic. Even if he was prepared to destroy the whole world, Zhang Cheng wanted to get this school back on track and not let it continue to fall. Understood. Thank you for your guidance. I swear that the Malfoy family will always be loyal to you. Lucius placed one hand on his chest and bowed deeply. All right, go about your business. I have to hurry back. That old fellow Dumbledore has been keeping a close eye on me recently. I don't want him to find out anything. After saying that, Zhang Cheng waved his hand and activated a teleportation spell, disappearing on the spot. At the same time, in the room of all requests in the Hogwarts castle, Harry Potter was waving his wand and fighting with his most hated enemy, Draco Malfoy. Because the two of them were of similar standards, they did not hold back and longed to defeat each other. Unfortunately, Harry was still lacking in experience. In the end, he was hit by Draco's attack. His whole body slammed into the wall, and he spat out a large mouthful of black blood. His face was filled with pain. Still as before, Dobby, the house elf who was hiding at the side, rushed out and cast a healing spell on him. Soon, Harry struggled to stand up and said with his 2 sharp eyes, "I will win next time." "Humph. I await your challenge at any time," Draco replied proudly with his chin raised. "You are still as annoying as before, but you are a good opponent. At least in the pursuit of power. Why don't we walk together? What do you think?" Harry Potter put away his wand and took the initiative to extend his right hand. "I agree. No matter what, we are teachers' students. I believe you understand what I mean." Draco hesitated for a moment and also extended his hand to shake Harry's. "Yes, I understand. Only teacher can make us stronger and make those who look down on us pay the price. But you have to promise me that this matter must be kept a secret. Otherwise, there will be big trouble," Harry reminded without batting an eyelid. "I'm not a fool. I know what to do. But you, how are you going to deal with those 2 annoying followers of yours? Granger and Weasley still stubbornly believe that you are still their best friend." What a naive thought. Draco opened his mouth and showed a mocking expression. In fact, he did not really hate the Savior. He just could not stand the fact that he gave up on him and chose to become friends with people like Ron. "You don't have to worry. I will settle things with them, but not now." When Harry Potter said this, his 2 hands were tightly clenched into fists. His nails even pierced into his skin and muscles. Dark red blood dripped from the gaps between his fingers. Abandoning the past, especially abandoning the first friendship he had since he was born, was undoubtedly very painful for a teenage boy. Chapter 748. Late at night, a large black dog stood at the outskirts of the Forbidden Forest, gazing at the lights of the castle not far away. It seemed to have thought of delicious food, saliva dripping from both sides of its mouth. Just as it was about to turn and leave, a figure suddenly walked out from the darkness, carrying a picnic basket woven from tree vines, emitting an alluring aroma. "Woof!" The large dog barked and rushed forward, attempting to snatch the basket and eat the food inside. Unfortunately, before it could reach the basket, The newcomer raised the basket high above its head, laughing as he teased, "Don't be hasty. My friend, I suggest you return to your original form before eating. I don't want to see your saliva everywhere." Woof, woof, woof. The large dog seemed to understand the other party's words, and its entire body began to transform violently. In a short while, it returned to the appearance of a skinny man. Obviously, this was not a dog, but a natural shapeshifter in the Magus world, Animagus. At the same time, he was Harry Potter's godfather, the famous Sirius Blake. After returning to his human form, he opened the basket, grabbed a piece of steak, and stuffed it into his mouth. He was completely like a wild beast, without a trace of the elegance and arrogance of a pure-blooded noble. Due to the lack of a stable source of food for a long time, Blake was so skinny that it was as if a layer of skin was tightly wrapped around his bones. Only his two eyes revealed a terrifying light. As he ate, he did not forget to ask, "How was it? Did you find Wormtail?" "I found it. It's beside the Weasley family's youngest son. I never thought that this fellow could hide as a pet for more than 10 years. If not for that magical map, I wouldn't have believed that he was still alive." Lupin, the defense against the dark arts professor, replied with a pained expression. Ever since the first time he invaded the Hogwarts, he had contacted this old friend of his. At the same time, he also found out that the real culprit behind the deaths of the Potter couple was actually Peter, who was already thought to be dead by the outside world. Of course, he did not believe him at first, but after seeing the name on the map of the survival points, he fell into a strong sense of guilt and self-blame. He hated himself for not discovering this conspiracy earlier, and hated his other friend for suffering so much in Azkaban, while the real culprit escaped all blame. His good days had come to an end. I'll catch him soon. Blake tore off a piece of chicken drumstick and swallowed it after chewing it. Hatred, especially after a long period of accumulated hatred, it could often stimulate the power in the deepest part of a person's subconscious. As long as he could take revenge, he didn't care about his own life or death, much less the consequences. Be careful. Hogwarts is not a place where you can come and go as you please, Lupin warned with a serious expression. However, Blake obviously didn't take it to heart. He shrugged nonchalantly. Don't worry. I know how to avoid Dumbledore and that annoying Snape. No, it wasn't just them. A very powerful Eastern sorcerer came this semester. Although he was very young, his strength was abnormally strong. Just in the classroom alone, he had created hundreds of offensive illusions. I guarantee that if you bump into it, you won't even have the chance to escape. In order to let his friend have a clear understanding of the situation, Lupin directly told him what had happened in the school recently. Damn it, where did this guy come from? Normally, this kind of person shouldn't be unknown in the magic world. Blake frowned and cursed in a low voice. After all, his original plan was to sneak into the castle, catch Peter, who was disguised as Rat Spot, and force him to confess to his crimes. But now, the sudden appearance of a powerful professor whose whereabouts were unknown would undoubtedly cause a lot of trouble. Lupin smiled bitterly and shook his head. I'm sorry, no one knows where he came from. Snape even suspects that he has some unspeakable connection with a mysterious person, but Dumbledore doesn't think so. Just be careful. He won't give you the chance to explain yourself like I did. All right, I'll keep that in mind. Also, how's Harry recently? Don't tell me he believed the contents of the newspaper. When he asked this question, Blake's tone was full of nervousness and helplessness. If there was anything in this world that he cared about, it would undoubtedly be his godson, Harry Potter, at the top of the list. He didn't know if it was out of guilt or sympathy, but he hoped that his godson could live a better life and not stay in a muggle family that abused Harry. I don't know, I'm not sure if he believed the contents of the newspaper, but one thing is for sure, he's madly practicing all kinds of killing spells, and he's extremely eager to take revenge for his dead parents. Promise me, no matter what, try not to meet him. I don't want to see any of you hurt or die. With his level, he's a threat to me. Blake's eyes revealed a look of surprise. Don't underestimate Harry. Do you remember the mysterious Eastern Magus I mentioned to you just now? Under his guidance, Harry's combat level is infinitely close to that of an adult Magus, and he's mastered many new attack and defense spells. Lupin quickly explained. That sounds like good news. Blake blinked his eyes uncertainly. Maybe, but Dumbledore is worried that Harry is too obsessed with power and might walk the same path as the mysterious person. In the Forbidden Forest, under the cover of the night, the two were discussing how to get Peter out of the rat form. Zhang Cheng was sitting on a chair in the lounge, watching a young Asian girl kneeling in front of him. That's right. This girl was none other than Zhang Xiao, who would become Harry Potter's crush next year. It had to be said that it was indeed an incredible thing to see an Asian face in the British magic world. Of course, he didn't call her over at this time because he wanted to do something with her. He just wanted to use the unforgettable throbbing of his first love to achieve his own unspeakable goal. To be precise, he wanted to personally design an extremely melodramatic trap. First, let Harry Potter fall in love with Zhang Xiao, and then let Zhang Xiao accidentally die in the hands of Dumbledore. Through the hatred born from the strong love, let the Savior and Dumbledore completely turn against each other and even fight to the death. Although the operation may be a little complicated, for Zhang Cheng, who mastered the psionic ability, he only needed to slightly modify the girl's memory. In fact, even without the psionic ability, the soul-seizing spell, known as one of the 3 unforgivable spells, could achieve the same goal. But for some reason, Voldemort's extremely stupid subordinates never thought of using this to drive a wedge between Harry Potter and Dumbledore. Chapter 749. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, the whole semester came to an end. As Draco Malfoy was no longer the childish and ridiculous boy in the original work, the half-giant Hagrid's Magical Animals class did not encounter too much trouble and went through the first year of teaching smoothly. In addition, Harry Potter had put too much energy into learning and training magic spells, resulting in him missing most of the Quidditch training time. Gryffindor did not win the final match and did not learn the Guardian spell against the Dementors. However, as the saying went, there were gains and losses in everything. He had learned several powerful elemental spells, and his combat power did not decrease compared to his own at the same time. Instead, it increased countless times. As for Hermione and Ron, because of his deliberate alienation, the relationship between the 3 of them gradually became cold, and they became no different from ordinary classmates. Even if they met, they would just nod and greet each other, and there was an indescribable awkwardness between them. Zhang Cheng was obviously happy to see such a change, and even pretended to comfort the other 2, and privately taught Miss Know-It-All some profound magical theory knowledge. It could be said that because of his interference, Dumbledore had lost control of the situation, and the future was like a wild horse out of control, and no one knew where it would run to. Of course, the most important thing was that after that night, the 2 young boys and girls who had just fallen in love seemed to have some sparks of their first love and began to get closer to each other intentionally or unintentionally. Although they were still in the period of ignorance, it would not be long before they turned into a raging fire that would devour everything. Standing in front of the window on the 2nd floor of the castle, Zhang Cheng looked at the students who were preparing for the final exam on the lawn below and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "The deeper the love, the deeper the ruthlessness." Intense emotions are always the most easily manipulated weakness. Let me see how much potential you have left, my dear Harry Potter. As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a familiar voice behind him. What are you looking at? He turned around and saw Albus Dumbledore, the headmaster, walking over from a distance. No, it's nothing. I'm just lamenting how good it is to be young. I could do whatever I want without any scruples. Zhang Cheng bowed slightly and replied with a smile. Dumbledore undoubtedly noticed Harry Potter on the lawn and the girl next to him with a sweet smile. His eyes revealed a gratified look. Yes, it's good to be young. You can pursue love and all the beautiful things. However, you seem to be only in your early 20s. You are far from being considered old, right? Mr. Principal, this has nothing to do with age. It's a display of one's mentality. In the East, we have always believed that a person's mental age is separate from their actual age. If a person had experienced too much, even if they were very young, they would act like an old man. But on the other hand, if a person is well protected his mental age will be far lower than his actual age. Even if he is 70 or 80 years old, he will still retain a part of his innocence. Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. Very philosophical words. I completely agree. But I'm curious. What exactly have you experienced that you can keep yourself under the control of calmness and rationality from beginning to end, without any strong emotional fluctuations at all? Dumbledore quietly probed. In fact, this was already the 8th time this semester that he had tried to figure out Harry's origin. However, Zhang Cheng did not give the old man the slightest chance. He responded bluntly, "My performance has nothing to do with age. It's just a kind of professional accomplishment. In Eastern culture, teacher is a sacred word. It means that anyone who is given this title must be strict with themselves and set a perfect example for the students to learn from. So this is the reason why you secretly got rid of several Valentine's cards that you received?" Dumbledore pretended to be playful and winked. "What else can I do? Don't tell me that you encouraged me to do something with those underage female students." Zhang Cheng pretended to be annoyed and rolled his eyes. "Ha ha ha, why not? You know, this is the English magic world. Although as the headmaster, I shouldn't encourage this kind of behavior, but I also won't stop it. Everyone has the right to pursue a beautiful love. As long as it's consensual, I'll be very happy to give you my blessings." Dumbledore couldn't help but laugh. There was no doubt that, as he said, the English magic world was indeed very open-minded in this regard. Last year, Gidro Lockhart organized a Valentine's Day event and was proud of receiving a large number of confession cards from girls. If it was the more conservative East, even if it didn't involve breaking the law, it would be criticized to death by social public opinion. As for senior men and women who were in love, it was even more common for them not to return home at night. Zhang Cheng had encountered several couples who hid under trees in the middle of the night and kissed passionately, and even acted out scenes in X-rated blockbusters. In this regard, he didn't want to express any opinions. He just spread out his hands innocently. Seeing this, Dumbledore couldn't help but sigh. "Well, it seems that you are a conservative and shy Easterner. But what do you think of Harry Potter?" "What do I think? I think he is very ambitious and understands the value of knowledge and power better than his peers. Don't you think that he is too obsessed with his desire for power and neglects a lot of precious things around him?" Feeling the aura of the old man unconsciously exuding, Zhang Cheng couldn't help but slightly raise the corner of his mouth and refute. "No, I don't think so. The pursuit of power was the instinct of every adept. The sooner they realized this, the higher they would be able to achieve. In the East, we call these children geniuses and give them more resources instead of trying to suppress them." "You are too nervous. Look, isn't Harry starting to fall in love like a normal boy? Maybe I'm a little too nervous." Dumbledore glanced at the young men and women on the lawn below, his eyes revealing a deep light, and no one knew what he was thinking. Just when Zhang Cheng was about to say something, he suddenly received a magic signal sent by Dobby, the house elf. He immediately smiled and bowed. "I'm very sorry, Headmaster. I just remembered that there's an urgent matter that needs to be dealt with." "It's okay, go do your thing." "Thank you." After saying that, Zhang Cheng immediately turned and disappeared at the end of the corridor. As soon as he left, Snape hurried over and whispered a few words in Dumbledore's ear. What you said is true." Dumbledore's expression changed greatly. "It's absolutely true. Lucius is definitely up to no good this time. You better be careful." Chapter 750. In the Forbidden Forest, in a hidden hole under the Wailing Willow, 3 of his former best friends were staring at each other nervously with their wands in hand. 2 of them were Sirius Blake and Lupin, while the other was Peter, who had turned into a mouse and hid for more than 10 years. Evidently, after an entire year of pursuit, Blake had finally gotten what he wanted. He had caught the true culprit who betrayed the Potter couple, and he planned to settle this once and for all. He paid no attention to Hermione Granger, who was hugging her pet Crookshank and curled up in a corner, as well as the unconscious Ron Weasley. It had to be said that even though Harry Potter had escaped from his original fate, these 2 unlucky fellows were still involved in a terrifying conspiracy because of their pets. "My dear Wormtail, tell me why you stopped hiding. Do you think you could defeat the both of us by yourself? Or do you feel guilty for causing the death of your best friend? So you decided to atone for your sins with your death? Blake raised his wand and sneered. Even though his enemy was right in front of him, he was not in a hurry to make a move. Instead, he wanted to let his opponent feel as much pain, despair, and fear as possible before he died. I think I can explain. Peter was obviously terrified and kept retreating cautiously, especially after turning into a mouse for a long time. He looked very cowardly and wretched, as if he could turn around and run away at any time. Unfortunately, he did not even dare to be distracted, let alone turn around and run away. In a duel between magi, giving one's back to the opponent was no different from committing suicide. An offensive spell was enough to determine victory and defeat, or even life and death. Ha ha! Explain? He actually said he can explain? Blake turned around and laughed wildly at Lupin, wiping away his tears as he laughed. What a despicable and shameless person. How good were the Potter couple in the past? They almost treated him as their own brother. But this guy? She betrayed her best friend without even blinking her eyes. Calm down. There are still 2 children watching. Lupin reminded with a cold expression. If not for the fact that there were students present, he suspected that he would have turned into a werewolf and rushed forward to tear Peter into pieces. After all, to betray one's friends was one of the most despicable acts in the entire Western magic world. Professor, can you tell me what's going on? Hermione asked softly with her eyes wide open. It's simple. Do you remember Sirius Black from the newspaper? In fact, he didn't betray Harry's parents. The one who really betrayed Potter's parents was another guy, a bastard who faked his own death and lived as a pet rat for more than 10 years. As he spoke, Lupin narrowed his eyes and stared at Peter, who was standing not far away. If looks could kill, then the latter would have died 10,000 times already. As the most intelligent student in the year, the girl immediately realized what the defense against black magic professor was trying to convey. She could not help but exclaim, "What? He's Harry's real enemy?" Lupin nodded lightly. That's right. He had disguised himself as a pet rat and hid in the Weasley household for more than 10 years. If Blake had not seen in a newspaper that he had lost a finger after transforming, he would probably never have discovered the truth. All right, this matter has nothing to do with you. Just stay here obediently. When everything is over, I will send you back to the castle. Just as Hermione was about to say something, intense mana fluctuations suddenly appeared. In the next second, boom, accompanied by the air explosion after the compression and expansion of the gas, Zhang Chung appeared right in the middle of the confrontation between the two sides. Along with him was the savior himself. Harry! Lupin was shocked. When Blake saw his godson, he was so agitated that he could not control himself. His entire body was trembling slightly, and his emotions were clearly out of control. I'm sorry, Professor. I have some urgent matters to attend to. I don't have time to chat with you right now. Harry Potter's face was gloomy as he bowed slightly. He then turned around and walked towards Peter Pettigrew. Hey, Potter, please listen to my explanation. This is actually a misunderstanding. I never thought of... Shut up. Heart-piercing. Harry obviously did not intend to listen to the nonsense of his enemy, who had betrayed his parents. He raised his hand and cast one of the 3 unforgivable curses, the heart-piercing curse. No, please stop. I am willing to admit my crimes. I am willing to go to trial and spend the rest of my life in Azkaban. Instantly, intense pain engulfed every inch of Peter's nerves. It felt as if 1,000 knives were stabbing into his body. It was excruciating. Trial? You seem to have misunderstood something. I don't intend to hand you over to anyone else. Furthermore, we are now in the middle of a trial. I am the judge, prosecutor, defense lawyer, jury, and executioner of the court. When Harry was speaking, he emitted an indescribably strong aura. From his pupils, Peter seemed to have found the palpitations that he could only feel when he was around Voldemort. He desperately knocked his head against the ground, trying to get rid of this horrifying illusion. Tell me, what benefits did Voldemort give you that made you choose to betray my parents? Harry stopped just a step away from Peter and asked in a cold tone. However, Peter did not want to answer any questions. He only desperately twisted his body, trying to transform back into a mouse and escape. However, before he could transform halfway, a flame spurted out from the tip of the wand, interrupted the whole process, forcing him to scream and roll on the ground. Appreciating the pain of his enemy, Harry's face showed a hint of pleasure. In the next few minutes, he constantly tortured Peter with magic, but made sure that it was not too fatal. After a while, Peter was like a mouse crawling out a pot of oil. The surface of his body was covered with large and small wounds. Among them, there were burns, scalds, electric injuries, stab wounds, scratches, frostbite, and bruises. His miserable state was simply indescribable. One of his eyes was even dug out while he was still alive. Finally, Hermione, who had never seen such a terrible scene, could not help but shout, "Enough! Stop! Harry, you shouldn't have become like this." "Oh, why? Do I have to follow the path that Dumbledore has designed?" Harry stopped casting and turned around with a sarcastic smile. "No, Granger, you don't understand anything at all. In fact, I didn't understand before, so I was led by the nose by others. But from now on, I won't do that anymore, because I already know what power is. Only when I'm strong enough can I control my own destiny. I don't want to be anyone's chess piece or puppet. I don't want to be foolishly used. You've changed, yes. To be exact, I've grown up. As the price of growing up, I have to abandon the naive past. Don't stop me, Hermione. Even if we are not destined to be friends in the future, I don't want to be enemies one day." Chapter 751. "No, Harry, you're still too young. You shouldn't have to endure such pain. Leave it to me. I'll make him pay for his actions." Lupin wasn't a fool. He understood what it meant to kill a living person of his own kind. He stood up to stop his good friend's son. "Let me do it. I wanted to get rid of this bastard personally since more than 10 years ago." Blake took 2 steps forward. The tip of his wand emitted a green light, unique to the death curse. Unfortunately, Harry Potter didn't appreciate it. He glanced at the 2 of them from the corner of his eyes and rejected without hesitation. "No need. I know what I'm doing. I'm also very clear about the price." As soon as he finished speaking, he pointed at the dying Peter and shouted, "Hellfire!" Boom! A purplish-red flame erupted from Little Dwarf's body. It emitted an unbearably high temperature. Even the surrounding soil and rocks showed signs of melting. As for the unlucky Peter, his entire body seemed to be pulled by some invisible force. He floated straight in the air and was burned bit by bit. It didn't stop until even his soul completely disappeared. There was no corpse. There was no residue. This terrifying flame was like a terrifying hell from the legends. Lupin and Blake stared with their eyes wide open. They didn't dare to look at what they saw in detail. "Oh my God," Hermione muttered to herself, not knowing what to do. Just as the atmosphere in the tree hole became more and more oppressive, Albus Dumbledore finally arrived. He roared angrily, "Bastard, look at what you've done. Tell me, Potter, is this the kind of revenge you want? Killing a living human being instead of sending him to trial?" "That's right. This is what I want. What's wrong? Are you angry because I didn't follow the path you arranged? You're no better than Voldemort when it comes to arranging someone else's life," Headmaster Dumbledore. Harry Potter mercilessly exposed his hypocritical mask. Just like what he said, how could a person who could even design his own death as a trap to trick the enemy be classified as a good person? In fact, Albus Dumbledore had always been a person who would do anything to achieve his goals. But in his daily life, he adhered to the bottom line he set for himself. So on the surface, he gave people a feeling of being a law-abiding person. But in reality, he was not the kind of person who would obediently accept a trial. Once the verdict was against him, he would definitely choose to knock out the law enforcement officer and hide. Is that what you think? You disappoint me, Harry. The old man sighed slightly, his face full of exhaustion. It had to be said that this sudden change had almost ruined the plan that he had been preparing for more than a decade. The only thing he could do now was to face the return of the Dark Lord directly. Disappointed? No, Harry was the one who was disappointed. "Mr. Principal, what you have done is not worthy of your reputation." Zhang Cheng, who had been silent for a long time, took a step forward and expressed his opinion with a faint smile on his face. Obviously, this action meant that from now on, he would clearly stand on the opposite side of Dumbledore. "Oh, what are you trying to say?" The old man's cloudy eyes suddenly burst with a frightening light. Zhang Cheng pretended to shrug his shoulders carelessly and explained, "What I want to say is that you always put yourself on the side of justice and let everyone believe that everything you do is for the sake of justice. But in reality, you and Voldemort are the same. You both pursue great power, but he is a little crazier than you. He has found a way to make himself immortal. So you are afraid, just like you are afraid that Gatler Grindelwald will surpass you. To put it bluntly, you are just a coward who is afraid of failure. I sincerely suggest that you put away the Elder's Wand. Fighting with me will only give you a taste of defeat. You will gain nothing." "Who are you?" Dumbledore frowned subconsciously. From the few words just now, he found that the young man standing in front of him seemed to know a lot of private and small secrets that he did not want to recall. "Who I am is not important. What is important is that good and evil are just values that change with the times, not a constant concept. Just like the ancient Romans thought that it was right for the master to kill the slave, but now people think that it is an evil crime. You do not represent justice, and Voldemort does not mean evil. Everything is just a fight for power and interests. I guarantee that if he succeeds in seizing power, it will not be long before the whole British magic world will praise his greatness, just like the British praised the bourgeois revolution for overthrowing the feudal system. Since Potter is not willing to be your pawn, you have no right to force him to do anything." After saying that, Zhang Cheng stepped forward again, raised his hand, and gently snapped his fingers. Snap! After a crisp sound, every wizard present immediately noticed that the magic energy in the surrounding air began to suddenly become chaotic, forming a vortex that was invisible to the naked eye. In order to cast a spell in such an environment, one must first be prepared to be smashed to pieces. Dumbledore felt this and narrowed his eyes, as if weighing the gains and losses. After about 2 or 3 minutes, he finally opened his mouth and said, "Well, you win this time, but I guarantee that you will not have the last laugh. The unknown future is the most exciting, isn't it? Don't worry, Mr. Principal, this game is still very long. We have plenty of time to play it slowly." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and replied meaningfully, "Oh, right. As the principal, I now announce your dismissal. From next semester onwards, you will no longer be a professor of Hogwarts magic practice." The old man was undoubtedly not someone to be trifled with. Before leaving, he did not forget to disgust his enemy. But Zhang Cheng was undoubtedly prepared. He laughed and said sarcastically, "I'm sorry, Mr. Principal. I'm afraid you don't have this right now. Just a few minutes ago, Lucius had signed an agreement with the school board and official from the Ministry of Magic, restricting your rights as a willful principal. From now on, if the principal wants to recruit or dismiss a professor, he must get the approval of 2/3 of the school board and the Ministry of Magic. How is it? Are you surprised? Very surprised? You're the one instructing Lucius. No. You're the one who deliberately spread the news to delay time so that I can't stop all this from happening." Chapter 752. Ha. That's right. Unfortunately, you realized it too late. See, this is the price you have to pay for putting yourself on the side of justice. You're like a beast trapped in a cage, forever unable to resist the laws and rules set by the bureaucracy. Because once the cage is broken, the civilians who support you will realize that you and Voldemort are essentially the same kind of people. Zhang Cheng laughed unscrupulously. There was no doubt that he was trying to provoke the old man in front of him, who usually wore a hypocritical mask, to see him lose control of his emotions. But unfortunately, the plan did not work. Although Dumbledore was trembling with anger, he still did not lose his mind. With a gloomy face, he asked, "What do you want? Me? I don't want anything. I just hate your self-proclaimed righteous and noble face. Sorry, Mr. Principal, from now on, I will be your enemy, a more terrible and deadly enemy than Voldemort. Because I won't be like him, trying to use pure violence to change everything. Do you know? I'm better than you at using public opinion and the existing order system to achieve my goals. Next, you will gradually be put on the side of evil, and I will be the representative of justice." When he said this, Zhang Cheng did not hide his malice, and the smile on his face made people shudder. "You won't succeed." Dumbledore did not know if he was refuting or encouraging himself. In short, after saying this, he immediately took the unconscious Ron and Hermione, who was completely at a loss, out of the tree hole and disappeared at the end of the path in the direction of the castle. Not long after he left, Sirius Black couldn't wait to say, "Harry, please remember, no matter what happens, no matter what choice you make, I will always stand behind you and support you. Thank you. If one day I need help, I will definitely come to you." Harry Potter responded seriously. Through the whole incident, he already knew that his godfather was not a despicable traitor, but a hero who sacrificed everything to avenge his parents. "No need to thank me. This is what I should do. Also, I'm very happy to see you get rid of that old Dumbledore's control. I've never liked him." Blake patted the boy's shoulder and smiled encouragingly. As a person who was full of rebellious thoughts in his bones, if it wasn't for the fact that he had no other choice, why would he choose to walk together with this insidious and inflexible old man? In fact, there were only 3 types of people who joined Dumbledore's camp. The first type was those who chose to work with Voldemort because they were afraid of his killing spree. The bureaucrats and most wizards in the British magic world belonged to this type. Another type was the standard idealists. The most typical example was the Weasley family, who were also extremely obsessed with the world of ordinary people. From the bottom of their hearts, they did not share Dumbledore's ideas. They believed that the world of magic should imitate ordinary people and establish a modern social system, completely bidding farewell to the blood and darkness of the past. They did not understand that magical power and technology were 2 completely different things. It was not the accumulation of knowledge that was triggered by quantitative change, but the standard model of mutation. Even the total contribution of 1,000,000 wizards could not compare to the contribution of 1 genius. As for the last type, there were the young people who were especially easily fooled. Before they reached adulthood, they had unknowingly received a large amount of biased and guided education in Hogwarts. Coupled with the fact that they could not feel the cruel nature of the world, they would risk their lives to follow Dumbledore and defend this so-called beautiful world with a little talk of big principles. In fact, the human desire for a beautiful world had nothing to do with the system at all. The main determinant of happiness was always material things. Better food, clothing, housing and transportation, better welfare and medical systems, more advanced technology and entertainment facilities. These were all that people pursued. If in a slave society, the master slaves could also enjoy these things and work no more than 8 hours a day, with 2 days of rest a week, it was believed that most ordinary people would not mind their status as slaves. On the other hand, could modern society really achieve the so-called equality? The famous advocate of free economy in the Western world, Friedrich August von Hayek, once said, "Money is one of the greatest tools of freedom that man has invented. Only money will be open to the poor, and power will never be." In a way, he was not wrong. In Europe, under the feudal system, all power was controlled by the aristocratic class. It was almost impossible for the common people to get away to change their class. But there was a second part of the sentence that was not said, which was, although money will be open to the poor, with the continuous accumulation of capital, it will inevitably flow more and more to the big capital, making the rich richer and the poor poorer, gradually giving birth to a new and firm monopoly of power. So, to some extent, equality could only stay at the stage of theory and fantasy, and there was absolutely no possibility of realization. After all, from the moment people were born, it was determined on a genetic level that some people were smarter and some were relatively mediocre. If a group of mediocre or even stupid people became rulers, it would be a disaster for the whole society. Therefore, the world would always be a place where the smart people became the rulers and the mediocre people became the ruled. No matter what system, this kind of class existed naturally and could not be eliminated. Dumbledore's biggest mistake was that he wanted the mediocre people to replace the smart people and become the ruling class of the magic world. And Voldemort saw through the nature of the magic world and resolutely raised the flag to support the pure-blood aristocrats to regain their power. It was not difficult to open the book, The History of Magic, to find that wizards who left their names in history or made major inventions were usually born in pure-blood aristocratic families. Even Dumbledore himself was an ancient pure-blood aristocrat. When everyone left, Harry Potter could not help but carefully ask, "Teacher, do you support Voldemort?" "Support? No, I just have a small cooperation with him, not support." "Don't worry, I won't stop you from taking revenge on him. But before you do, I suggest that you pretend to surrender, observe his every move closely, and when the time is right, launch a fatal blow from behind. After all, if you want to defeat a powerful enemy, you must first understand his weakness, right?" Zhang Cheng took the opportunity to instill his own ideas into the savior. "Understood. I will do as you ask." Harry gritted his teeth and nodded. Seeing the strong hatred inadvertently revealed in the boy's eyes, Zhang Cheng could not help but slightly raise the corner of his mouth and softly comfort him. "Relax. I promise you won't have to endure for too long. Believe me, compared to directly killing the enemy, first let the enemy think that he has won, and then when he is immersed in the joy of victory, he will be beaten into the abyss. That's the most anticipated expression, and it will give people an incomparable sense of satisfaction." Chapter 753. After officially falling out with Dumbledore, Zhang Cheng immediately felt the hostility around him when he returned to school. Regardless of whether it was Snape, who had a bad relationship with him, or the other professors who usually maintained a neutral attitude, they all adopted an isolating attitude and did not even greet him when they met. Perhaps if it was someone else, they would have a complex psychological change, or even resign because they could not stand such a living environment. But unfortunately, Zhang Cheng did not care about this at all. Instead, he encouraged his two students, Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy, to take the initiative to display their talents and establish a high prestige among the students. After all, Hogwarts was a magic school. The most important thing was not the professors, but the students who were hailed as the future of the British magic world. As long as he could deal with them, he could influence the attitude of the parents behind the scenes, and thus change the attitude of public opinion and the Ministry of Magic bureaucrats. This was also why he could not wait for Dumbledore to decline the position of Minister of Magic, and hid here as the principal for half a century. Fortunately, this bloodless battle only lasted for a month before a truce was declared. Of course, it was not because the conflict between the two sides had been resolved, but because the whole semester had ended and all the students took the express train home to enjoy the relaxing and pleasant summer vacation. Due to his dislike of the Dursleys, Harry Potter did not return to the home he had lived in for 12 years. Instead, he chose to accept Draco's invitation to spend the entire holiday at Malfoy Manor. It had to be said that this was full of irony, and it also made Albus Dumbledore very angry. Not long ago, Lucius had used his outstanding political skills to unite the school's board of directors and officials of the Ministry of Magic to severely restrict his authority as the principal. In particular, he had weakened his authority to appoint personnel and control finances. While the old man was busy comforting the uneasiness of the professors and dealing with the miscellaneous matters in the school, Zhang Qing easily got rid of the little tail that was following behind him. He came directly to the door of a seemingly ordinary house and raised his hand to gently knock on the door. Bang, bang, bang. After a few knocks on the wood, a white woman who looked to be 34 years old opened the door and asked in a rather polite voice, "Hello, sir. How can I help you?" "Ah, hello, Mrs. Granger. I'm Hermione's professor. Is she at home right now?" Zhang Qing bowed politely to express his intention. "Professor." The woman was stunned at first, but she quickly reacted and covered her mouth in shock. "Oh my God, you're a sorcerer? Sorry, please come in. Hermione is in a room upstairs." "Thank you very much," Zhang Cheng said politely and stepped into the British-style house. But before he could sit down, Hermione's mother shouted at the top of her lungs, "Granger, Come down quickly. A professor from a school is looking for you. What? What? A girl wearing a casual t-shirt and denim shorts quickly ran down the stairs. When she saw who it was, her pupils suddenly shrank. After all, the memory of what happened in the tree hole more than a month ago was still fresh in her mind. She even occasionally had nightmares. Seems like you had a good holiday. How about it? Do you mind talking to me alone? Zhang Cheng asked with a smile. Hermione hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded gently. Okay, then you two talk. I'll go out for a walk and come back in half an hour. Her mother saw this scene and immediately picked up a coat, planning to go out for a walk to give the two of them some privacy. Watching her mother gradually walk away, the girl raised her head and asked in an uncertain tone, Professor, what do you want to talk to me about first? Very simple. I hope you can join my side like Harry. In return, I can teach you profound magic knowledge that Hogwarts can never learn and protect your parents from harm in the future war. Zhang Cheng did not have the slightest intention of hiding his intentions and openly stated his conditions. Because with the deepening of his research on the power of creation, he increasingly felt that he needed an assistant. Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy obviously did not have the talent in this area, so he could only target Miss Know-It-All. It was not difficult to see from her academic results that Hermione was very talented in theory and research. She was almost a perfect candidate. War. The girl's eyes widened in surprise, as if she could not believe that she would hear such a terrible word from a professor. Yes, war. It's a war in the magic world. Zhang Cheng gave an affirmative answer. You should know that the history of mankind is a history of war, especially the war in the world of magic, which has never stopped from beginning to end. Especially the ambitious Voldemort, who is not really dead. He is planning to return and start a new war. When the time comes, the British magic world will be divided into two. Either join Dumbledore and Voldemort to fight against each other, or join Voldemort to start a revolution and destroy everything in existence to establish a new order. Only I have the right to protect some people with a neutral attitude. Why are you telling me this? What is your purpose? Hermione was undoubtedly the first to know these hidden secrets, and she could not help but tremble in fear. I need you. You can say that I need your talent to help me complete a great research. In addition, do you have the heart to see your parents die in murder, or to avoid danger, erase their memories once and for all, and immerse yourself in pain for the rest of your life? Make your choice, Miss Granger. This will determine your future. A silver light flashed in Zhang Cheng's pupils, and he began to exert influence on her brain through his psionic ability. In just a few seconds, Hermione seemed to see the bleak scene of her being separated from her parents in the future, and she could not help but cry. When she returned to reality, she hurriedly wiped her tears, bit her lower lip, and said in a resolute tone, No, I will never let that happen. I agree to your conditions, Professor. Great. I promise that you will not regret the choice you have made. Here, I have a set of experimental data here. Your first task is to find a vague pattern from the messy results. As long as you complete this task before school starts, I will give you 2 amulets, which are enough to protect the life of the wearer. After that, Zhang Cheng stood up, took out a tissue, and gently wiped the tears of the girl. Then he left a thick notebook behind and cast a teleportation spell to disappear. He knew very well that as long as he opened the notebook, Hermione would immediately be attracted to the content inside. Curiosity and exploration were human nature, and some people were particularly obvious in this aspect, and Miss Know-It-All was one of them. Come, wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 754. Late at night, in the most secret room of the Malfoy Manor, a cold corpse was placed on the autopsy table. Dobby, the house elf who had been modified, was busy injecting potions that emitted strange energy into the corpse. Every time a potion was injected into the muscle tissue, the corpse would undergo a different degree of mutation. The skin would turn into hard rock, or strange scales and hair would grow. There were even some that directly transformed into water, fire, and other elemental forms. It was like a treasure trove of endless possibilities. Obviously, this was not an ordinary corpse. It was a Hogwarts student who had the power of creation in his body. To be precise, he had officially graduated this summer and was planning to find a job and start a new life. But what was unbelievable was that he had suddenly come into contact with something that caused the power of creation to mutate in his body, causing a violent energy shock. In the end, he died a violent death. But the mutation caused by the power of creation did not disappear because of death. It was still perfectly preserved. Before the accident happened, this was the slowest and most inconspicuous of all the experimental subjects. So, Zhang Cheng wanted to find out what had caused the hormones of the power of creation to change and even kill its own host. Just as he was staring at the constantly changing corpse and thinking hard, the house elf suddenly stopped what she was doing and carefully said, "Great and evil master, Dobby has done as you instructed and checked every inch of skin and muscle. And the result? Tell me what you found." Zhang Cheng narrowed his eyes and asked in a casual tone, "Yes, master. Dobby found something very interesting. Even though he is dead, his cells did not die. Instead, they have entered another state, a state that can almost be called immortality." The house elf raised her hands and shouted excitedly. "Immortality?" Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's right, master. Immortality." Dobby stretched out a finger and lightly scratched the corpse's left arm. She opened her mouth and revealed a mouth full of yellow teeth as she explained, "Please look. Even if the person is dead and their blood is no longer flowing, the cells still maintain a strong self-healing ability and can actively absorb magic energy from the air to maintain their own survival." When Zhang Cheng saw this, he sneered and shook his head. "No, this can't be considered eternal life. At most, it can only be considered a strengthened version of the troll physique. Truly immortal cells should be indestructible, able to survive any kind of attack. Your request is too high, great master." From a certain perspective, this corpse had already reached the standard of immortality that most adepts had in mind. "Perhaps you can consider using it to create a body for the Dark Lord. I'm sure he'll be very satisfied," Dobby said with a sinister expression. It had to be said that after his transformation, he had completely abandoned his previous naive and kind side, and had completely merged with his subconscious, insidious, and cunning personality. He was an out-and-out dangerous person. Making a new body for Voldemort? That's a good idea. Having said that, Zhang Cheng raised his right hand and forcefully extracted a large amount of ink-like substance from the corpse. He then placed it into a glass container that was as thick as a forearm. Feeling the chaotic magic energy within, he pursed his lips and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, "Then let me give my dear the Dark Lord a small surprise. I hope he'll like this gift. He probably will never know that he has unknowingly become one of your experimental subjects. Please allow me to give you my highest praise. You are the greatest and most evil adept in history." Dobby bowed deeply, her eyes shining with fanaticism and worship. "Extract anything useful, then clean up the corpse. I don't want to leave any traces behind, understood?" Zhang Cheng ignored the meaningless flattery and immediately gave the order to destroy the corpse. After all, there were approximately 180 students in the Hogwarts who carried the power of creation within them. In order to ensure that the experiment was carried out in an orderly manner, he had to ensure that the news was strictly kept under wraps to prevent unnecessary panic and chaos. "Understood, but are you sure you don't want to send one to Miss Granger as well? She's your chosen assistant. Perhaps it would be beneficial for both you and her to get in touch with her earlier." Dobby raised her head and suggested. Zhang Cheng stroked his chin and hesitated for a moment. He then nodded. "All right, but don't tell her how you got it. Hermione is still too young. She needs to be trained slowly to become a qualified assistant." "Don't worry, master. Dobby knows what to do." The house elf bowed again, then turned around and took out a small bottle of black substance. She then cast Phantom Shift and disappeared from the spot. The next second, with a bang, she appeared directly in Hermione's bedroom. The girl was lying on her bed in her pajamas. She was looking at the experiment notes that Zhang Cheng had left behind before he left. Her eyebrows were almost tangled together. When she saw a strange-looking house elf appear in front of her, she was so frightened that she almost screamed. Thank goodness. Dobby had already expected this situation. She quickly put her index finger on her lips and made a shushing gesture. Shh, don't be afraid, Miss Granger. I'm not here to hurt you. On the contrary, I'm here to give you something interesting. Something? Hermione subconsciously leaned against the headboard. Yes. Here, Master asked me to give this to you. Believe me, it will be an eye-opener for you. After saying this meaningful sentence, Dobby put the test tube filled with the black substance on the desk next to her. She then bowed and left with phantom shift. After making sure that the house elf was really gone, the girl carefully jumped off the bed and grabbed the test tube to see what was inside. But the moment his finger came into contact with the glass, the mysterious black substance suddenly began to boil, emitting a brilliant multicolored light. At the same time, some kind of power seemed to have awakened in her body. It flowed quickly through her blood vessels, and her eyes emitted a dark blue light. The whole process lasted for about 3 to 5 minutes. It finally stopped when Hermione couldn't help but shiver. Oh God, what's wrong with me? What happened? Through the vanity mirror placed in the corner, she could clearly see that her originally thick brown hair had a strange dark blue color under her eyes. Her hair was constantly changing like flowing water, and she was as beautiful as a fairy in a fairy tale. In addition, all the pores and wrinkles on her body had disappeared. Her skin was so smooth that there wasn't a single wrinkle. Calm. Wonderful Bookhouse. Chapter 755. Excellent activity, excellent adaptability, average fusion. It seems that it will take some time before this thing can enter the live experiment stage. Zhang Cheng obviously did not know how much trouble his little gift had brought to Hermione Granger. He was busy testing the various characteristics of the black substance. To him, this thing that was born from the mutation of the power of creation was full of incredible characteristics. Not only could it give the cells a strong adaptability, but it could also observe the subtle interactions between each cell nucleus and the other cell nuclei through a microscope. It was as if these cells had gained a relatively independent consciousness and could automatically make judgments based on external stimuli. Of course, this was not the most interesting thing. The most interesting thing was that although the black substance strengthened more than 90% of the cells in the body, it did not strengthen the brain cells. This meant that no matter how strong the body was, the brain was extremely fragile, no different from an ordinary person. During the mutation process, the brain of the deceased could not withstand the sudden increase in blood pressure, and the entire skull exploded, turning into a mess of tofu pudding. However, as a strengthening agent, it was undoubtedly qualified. At least after strengthening, the body of a magus could carry an increase in the total amount of magic power, and would gain a certain degree of resistance to various magical attacks. The only thing that Zhang Cheng could not figure out was the conditions under which this mutation occurred. The strong will of the experiment itself? Or was it stimulated by external stimuli? Or was it a chain reaction caused by a specific magic item? Since he did not observe the situation at the time, he could not speculate any results at all. Even some of the reenactment spells that Magi often used were ineffective. Just when he thought that he had once again walked into a dead end, Lucius Malfoy suddenly pushed open the door and barged in, shouting excitedly, "Great news! Next semester, Hogwarts will hold the tournament of the top 3 that has been suspended for more than 700 years. I believe that old Dumbledore will be racking his brains over this. As long as he makes a mistake, we can use it as an excuse to make things difficult for him. Even if we can't drive him away, we can introduce more laws to restrict the rights of the headmaster." Oh, sounds interesting, but I am more concerned about the Dark Lord's plan. Tell me, how does he intend to announce his return? Zhang Cheng slowly turned around, his face full of a playful expression. Peter Pettigrew was already dead, burned to ashes by Harry Potter's infernal hellfire. Now, he really wanted to know how Voldemort planned to complete his resurrection plan without his help, especially to release one of his most loyal servants, Buddy Crouch Jr. I'm sorry, you didn't mention this matter. He only asked me to prepare a few extra tickets for the Quidditch World Cup. I heard that he had taken in 2 new servants some time ago. He will probably take this opportunity to gather the Death Eaters, Lucius guessed in an uncertain tone. New servant? Zhang Qing's eyes were filled with surprise. Lucius nodded solemnly. Yes, one was called Mattier, and the other was called Cindy. All I know is that they are crazy dueling enthusiasts. They participate in at least 5 duels every year, and every time they kill their opponents cruelly, so they are wanted by the entire European magic community. So that's how it is. It seems like our Lord Black Devil King is really charming. No matter where he goes, he will meet his fanatical admirers. Isn't that so? Zhang Cheng said meaningfully. This time, Lucius wisely kept his mouth shut and did not participate in the discussion. As a noble, he did not want to be targeted by the cold-blooded Voldemort because of a momentary slip of the tongue. Zhang Cheng circled the basement twice and suddenly ordered, "Give me 2 tickets for the Quidditch World Cup. I want to see with my own eyes what he's up to." It's a piece of cake. Lucius did not hesitate at all as he readily agreed. It might take months of savings for an ordinary adept family to purchase a pricey entrance ticket. However, for someone like him who had acquired countless businesses, this amount was nothing. Time flew, and more than a week passed in the blink of an eye. As the Quidditch World Cup finals approached, the entire British magic community entered a state of revelry. Even the mature Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy were no exception. Sports, in particular, intense and confrontational sports, could always arouse the primitive instincts hidden in the human subconscious. To some extent, it was a continuation of the impulse to hunt and kill, and it could cause the human spirit to enter a state of extreme excitement. Unfortunately, Zhang Cheng could no longer feel these. With 2 VIP tickets, he went to Hermione's house alone. But as soon as he saw her, he saw Mrs. Granger's worried face. Out of politeness, he took the initiative to ask, "Madam, are you in trouble?" "It's Hermione. She locked herself in her room for more than a week and did not let us in. I'm worried that something might have happened to her. You know, magic." The latter was obviously hesitant, but in the end, she told the truth. After all, it was quite unacceptable for an ordinary family to have a daughter become a wizard, not to mention that the process of learning magic could cause accidental injuries from time to time. "Don't worry, if you don't mind. I can go up and take a look." Zhang Cheng smiled and took the initiative to accept this effortless task. "Thank you so much. I really don't know what to say. Hermione is upstairs. You can go up and find her yourself." Mrs. Granger quickly pointed to the room on the 2nd floor, which was close to the right side of the staircase. Without any hesitation, Zhang Cheng directly went to the door and gently knocked on it. Soon, the girl's restless voice came from the door. "Damn it. Mom, I told you, don't disturb me. It's me, Miss Granger. No matter what happens, you'd better open the door first. Don't tell me you think a mere door can stop me from entering?" Zhang Cheng said in a half-joking tone. Professor." Hermione was undoubtedly shocked. Suddenly, there was a crashing sound in the room. She did not know what she had knocked over. After a minute, the closed door opened a gap. The girl was tightly wrapped in a blanket. She carefully looked around to make sure that her parents were not in the room before she opened the door completely. She lowered her voice and urged, "Quick, come in. What are you doing?" Zhang Cheng walked into the room. The first thing he saw was the bed, the floor, and the table were densely packed with books and notes. There was even a pincer used to brew magic potions. I'm not too sure. You should take a look yourself." After locking the door, Hermione took off the blanket covering her body, revealing her stunning body, hair, and face. Chapter 756. Deep blue eyes that resembled gemstones, hair that flowed like water, and dense water elemental particles that surrounded the surface of her body and skin. The young lady in front of him did not look like a normal human at all. Instead, she had many similarities with magical creatures, such as tree spirits and water fairies. Unbelievable. I have to say, my dear Miss Granger, your current appearance is extremely beautiful. The corners of Zhang Cheng's mouth curled up slightly, not concealing the surprise in his heart. In this world, there were 2 relatively reliable speculations regarding the origin of magi. One of them was that all human magi were born from the mixed-blood descendants of ordinary humans and magical creatures. Simply put, this speculation was that at the beginning, humans did not have the ability to cast spells. Instead, they obtained the corresponding genes from magical creatures, and then through the continuous mixing method, they obtained a special race that relied on bloodlines to pass on. However, as this kind of transmission continued to spread, there were some unexpected changes that gradually occurred. For example, even if two magi were to combine, there was a certain probability of producing a dud that could not release magic. Another example was that in the process of passing on the bloodline of magi, the genes that determined magic gradually turned recessive and continued to spread among the descendants until a certain recessive gene was suddenly activated and regained the ability to cast spells. If this speculation was correct, then those mudbloods that were despised by the pure-blooded nobles could in fact be considered the descendants of magi. It was just that they had lived in the world of ordinary humans for too long, so much so that they had completely cut off contact with the magical world. As for the other speculation, it originated from ancient myths and legends. It was said that in ancient times, when humans were still primitive tribes that ate raw meat and drank blood, there was once a magical explosion on Earth. At that time, all the humans and animals near the point of the explosion inevitably mutated. Animals mutated into the magical creatures of today, while humans mutated into fairies, seductresses, elves, magi, and other different forms. In short, no matter which type it was, the mutation in the girl's body was most likely a type of atavism, a manifestation of the recessive gene being completely activated. Unfortunately, Hermione obviously did not think so. She covered her face and cried, "Beautiful? Professor, now is not the time to joke. You have to know that I've been worried to death these past few days. If I can't return to normal, how can I go out and meet people?" No, Miss Granger, I'm not joking. Take a good look at yourself in the mirror and feel the powerful magic flowing through your veins. I guarantee that even Dumbledore and Voldemort would drool greedily if they saw you now. I can assure you that to every powerful magus, you're the most beautiful goddess in their hearts. Zhang Cheng placed his hand on the girl's shoulder and whispered into her ear. Hermione was obviously not used to this kind of intimate behavior with an adult male. Her heartbeat suddenly accelerated, and her face was quickly covered with a layer of faint blush. She stuttered and said, But, I can't go out like this, right? My parents will be terrified. Don't worry. I think a transformative earring should be enough. Zhang Cheng took out a white pearl earring from his magic waist pouch and gently pricked Miss Noatal's earlobe. Hermione could not help but cry out in pain. But soon she found that the pierced part was not bleeding, and there was some strange information in her mind. It was as if she could change her appearance with just a thought. Driven by strong curiosity, she closed her eyes and recalled her previous appearance. After about 2 or 3 seconds, when she opened her eyes again, she had returned to normal in the mirror. Only her white and smooth skin was perfectly preserved, making her look full of the unique elegance and purity of a young girl. How do you feel? Is it no different from before? This is the power of magic. You can easily solve everything that bothers and troubles you. After saying that, Zhang Qing kissed the girl's cheek, took the initiative to stand up, and opened the window to let fresh air fill the bedroom that had been closed for God knows how many days. He deliberately pretended that he did not see the slightly infatuated look in the girl's eyes. As a veteran who was good at playing tricks and tricks, creating an intimate and ambiguous atmosphere with some small actions and psychological hints was as easy as eating and drinking to him. After all, women, regardless of age, were inherently more emotional than rational. As long as he could find and break the weakest link in the heart, he could make them give everything to him, even if they knew that the other party was deceiving and using them. The pitiful Hermione didn't know that she was a butterfly that had fallen into a trap. She was completely immersed in an indescribable emotion. Only when the wind blew did she finally wake up. She hurriedly touched her slightly hot face, lifted her feet, and stuffed a few pink undergarments that she had casually thrown on the floor under the bed, trying hard to maintain her ladylike side. After doing all this, she mustered up the courage to ask, "Professor, why did you suddenly come to see me? Is there anything important?" Zhang Cheng turned his face and glanced at the girl's slightly nervous reaction from the corner of his eye. He smiled and shook his head. "No, it's nothing. Actually, I'm here this time just to invite you to watch the Quidditch World Cup. Are you interested?" "Quidditch World Cup?" Hermione's eyes widened in surprise. How could she not be surprised? Last semester, she clearly remembered that the young professor in front of her had never watched any of the Quidditch competitions held by the school, nor did he show the slightest interest in this wizarding sport. Ha ha! Don't be so surprised. In fact, I'm not going to watch boring competitions. I'm going to witness the prologue of the return of the great Dark Lord. Of course, it's not a bad choice to watch some sports occasionally to relax. Zhang Cheng explained with a big laugh. However, he did not say that he wanted to let the girl see the dark side of the magic world and completely destroy the last trace of naivety in her mind. Just as a philosopher once said, the reason why most people thought the world was beautiful was because they were too well protected and had not personally experienced the bloodiest, cruelest, and darkest side of the world. Only those who had really experienced it and still had hope in human nature were qualified to hold the banner of justice high. Unfortunately, such people were too few, so few that they were almost negligible. After most people had personally experienced terrible things, they would often feel despair in human nature and even throw themselves into the arms of darkness. Harry Potter's sudden change in personality was the best proof. Now, Zhang Cheng was going to do the same thing to Hermione Granger. Only this time, he would add a little love that Albus Dumbledore praised to the heavens to prove that love was never the privilege of the so-called righteous, and that evil people could also have it. Come, wonderful book house. Come. Chapter 757. Oh my God. Baby, you finally came out of the bedroom. What's the matter with your smooth skin? What's the matter with your smooth skin? Is it some kind of beauty magic? Come on, give Mommy some too. As soon as she walked down the stairs, Mrs. Granger rushed up and held her daughter in her arms, asking questions like any mother who cared about her daughter. She was especially excited and expectant about her daughter suddenly becoming beautiful. "Mommy, let go of me. And don't touch my face and neck." Hermione's face was red, and she struggled desperately, trying to break free from her mother's arms. If there were no outsiders present, she would not mind being intimate with her mother. However, there was an outsider present, and it was a man too. Some intimate actions were slightly awkward. Mrs. Granger seemed to have noticed this too. She reluctantly let go of her daughter, but she still did not give up and asked, "Is there really no spell or potion that can make your skin smooth?" "Of course not. It was an accident that I became like this." Hermione insisted on the word accident. In the beginning, she wanted to let her parents know about the wonders of the British magic world. However, the more she learned, the more she realized that there was a terrible danger behind it. So, she gradually changed her attitude and began to hide the truth. In the end, she did not even want to reveal what happened at school. Zhang Cheng sensed the estrangement. He took out a small bottle of life-prolonging potion that was rich in life essence and handed it to the girl's mother with a smile. "Mrs. Granger, if you don't mind, please try this. I promise that you will become as young and beautiful as you are in your 20s. Really? For me? This is too precious. I don't know what to say." The latter was obviously surprised. She carefully took the bottle and sniffed it under her nose. Then, she dripped 2 drops on the back of her hand. Instantly, the slight wrinkles disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. The thick pores also slowly tightened, and in their place was an indescribable delicacy. It was as if she had returned to the most beautiful Caucasian woman of 18 to 20 years old. After discovering this incredible change, Mrs. Granger immediately poured out the medicine and smeared it on her face, neck, shoulders, arms, abdomen, and other parts of her body. After a short while, she looked like a new person. Standing next to her daughter, she looked more like a sister than a mother and daughter. Staring at her new self in the mirror, she couldn't help but exclaim, "Unbelievable! Good heavens! I simply don't know what to say. Thank you, Mr. Professor." This magical potion must be very precious, right? Of course. This is made from a special material called life essence. Its greatest function is not only to restore one's youth, but also to forcibly prolong one's lifespan. If you can take it once in a while, it won't be a problem for you to live to a few hundred years old. Zhang Cheng deliberately pretended to be serious as he explained. Prolong my life. Hermione's voice suddenly became sharp. According to what she had learned in school, there was only one person in the magic world who had the ability to concoct life-prolonging potions, and that was the alchemist who had created the Philosopher's Stone, the famous Nico Lemur. Other than that, even Dumbledore and Voldemort couldn't do it. However, with the destruction of the Sorcerer's Stone, the life-prolonging potion disappeared completely. No one could make it again. When the mother saw her daughter's shocked expression, she immediately realized the value of the small bottle of green liquid in her hand. She carefully asked, "Granger, tell me, is this potion worth a lot of money?" The girl obviously hesitated for a few seconds and finally nodded her head gently. "Yes, mother. Even in the magic world, the value of this potion cannot be measured by money." When Mrs. Granger heard this, her eyes suddenly showed a strong sense of conflict and entanglement. On one hand, as a woman, she desperately wanted to keep this potion that could preserve her youth and beauty. On the other hand, she didn't want to accept this expensive gift for no reason. Seeing that the small gift had the corresponding effect, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with a trace of undetectable playfulness. He took the initiative to persuade her. "Please accept it, madam. For me, this potion is not as valuable as others think. To be exact, in the future, Hermione can also concoct a potion with a similar effect. You can't imagine how outstanding your daughter is. Her talent in magic is like the Einstein, Newton, and Marie Curie in the world of ordinary people." Really? Mrs. Granger subconsciously stared at Hermione, who also didn't know what to do. Although she knew that her daughter had always been smarter than her peers and had a faster learning speed, she couldn't imagine that her daughter's achievements in the future could be comparable to those great scientists who laid the foundation of modern human science. "Of course it's true. Time will prove everything." Zhang Cheng pursed his lips and showed a confident smile. Because with the huge knowledge he had now, even an ordinary wizard could be trained to become a master magician, not to mention a girl who was much smarter than her peers and had received both science and magic education at the same time. Not many boys and girls in puberty could resist someone praising them in front of their parents, no matter how smart and mature they appear to be. Hermione, whose mind was in a blank state, even forgot what happened next. She went back to her room in a daze and changed into a beautiful dress. It was not until she walked out of the house that she finally woke up. She raised her head and asked softly, "Why? Why are you so good to me? I think you know the reason, don't you? To me, you are a special existence, even more special than Harry. There is a beautiful gem hidden in your body. It's just that no one has discovered it yet, but I believe that one day it will blossom with a beautiful light that can destroy everything." Looking at the street illuminated by the sun, Zhang Cheng gave an extremely vague reason in a profound manner. However, it was this extremely vague reason that made the girl involuntarily think of something. She lowered her head shyly and replied in a mosquito-like voice, "Thank you." Then, the two of them fell into a strange atmosphere where neither of them spoke. It was only when they reached a deserted alley at the corner of the street that they cast a teleportation spell and disappeared without a trace. At the same time, Voldemort, who was hiding in the old mansion of Little, stared at his new subordinates with a pair of horrifying eyes through his extremely twisted and simple body. After a few minutes, he spoke in a hoarse voice. "Remember, this mission can only succeed. Failure is not an option. You have to show your strength and let everyone know that I am about to return. No one can stop this from happening. Understood? We will make the entire magic world tremble under the mark of the dark demons." A man wrapped in a cloak shouted loudly and fanatically. "That's right. For the pride of the pure bloods. For the future of the magic world." Another female chimed in. Chapter 758. The Quidditch World Cup was a carnival held by the Wizards every 4 years. Its scale and scope of influence in the world of magic were almost comparable to the Football World Cup in the world of ordinary people, or even more so. After all, although the influence of the Football World Cup covered most of the world, there were other intense sport competitions such as basketball, rugby, track and field, swimming, and fighting to choose from. However, the Wizards only had one sport, and that was Quidditch. There was no other choice, so it was not surprising that they were crazy about it. In fact, there were still 10 days before the start of the competition. Around a hidden stadium in England, there were already many fanatical fans who had arrived in advance and set up their own tents. At the same time, there were a large number of vendors selling all kinds of strange gadgets and souvenirs, as well as gamblers who wanted to take the opportunity to make a fortune. That's right, it was sports betting. However, the adepts had never set up any laws to restrict gambling. As such, anyone who could produce real gold or silver coins from their pockets, from the elderly to the children who had just learned how to speak, could participate in the game. Enjoying the scene full of laughter and happiness, Zhang Cheng could not help but slightly raise the corner of his mouth and sigh with a smile. What a bunch of carefree idiots, aren't they? I'm afraid they would never have imagined that something so interesting would happen next. I completely agree. This is the world that Dumbledore wants to build. If it continues to develop like this, it won't be long before the entire wizard community becomes more and more depraved and addicted to pleasure. At that time, we will gradually become the vassals of the Muggles, or even slaves. He doesn't understand that the reason why the Muggle government doesn't dare to order us around is not because they are friendly, but because they fear the power of magic. Once they find out that the wizards have begun to become weak, they will immediately tear off their hypocritical masks, arrest us all, and send us all to the laboratory for cruel experiments. Lucius Malfoy obviously understood the darkness and greed of humans, especially the ordinary human world, very well. He spoke the true meaning of the so-called peace. Since humans entered civilized society, the wars and killings between each other had never stopped. The degree of cruelty was far more terrible than any species that had existed on Earth before. But why did all the major countries stop all-out war at the same time after the end of the Second World War and turn to spies, infiltration, supporting puppets, proxy wars, and other relatively cautious methods of warfare? It's not that the upper echelons of these countries have become virtuous. It was because they couldn't afford the price of an all-out war. A global thermonuclear war meant that human civilization was likely to be destroyed. Even if some people survived, it would be difficult for them to rise again in the dangerous wasteland. Anyone who knew a little about biology would know that all creatures needed to maintain a certain degree of diversity to survive. The power of firearms was enough to cause fatal damage to the diversity of surface creatures. Therefore, strictly speaking, peace was equivalent to nuclear level. Perhaps many people who didn't know the truth would find it very strange that the barbaric and bloodthirsty Europeans used to be so warlike in the past. From Greece to Rome, from the barbarian invasion to the Dark Middle Ages, and then to the age of great navigation and the modern era full of gunpowder, there was almost no year where there was no war. Why did he suddenly become peace-loving during the Cold War? The answer was very simple. They were frightened by the two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union, waving their nuclear weapons every day. Although the two countries had never really started a war in Europe and had coincidentally chosen Asia as the battlefield for the proxy war, those who understood geopolitics knew that Europe was too important. Once a war started, it would definitely be a great war. Therefore, neither side dared to fight. On the contrary, Asia was not so important. Fighting would not cause the situation to go out of control. At the same time, they could also find out the background of their archenemy. Why not? That's right. Once the wizards become docile, they won't be far from extinction. You're smarter than I thought. Zhang Cheng glanced at the meticulously dressed, middle-aged, handsome guy with some surprise. This guy's performance in the original work could be said to be extremely idiotic, no matter how he looked at it. He didn't look like a noble who was proficient in conspiracy and intrigue. But now he suddenly realized that Lucius wasn't stupid. Many of his seemingly stupid choices were actually forced. Once he obtained enough resources, he would immediately become a troublesome opponent. Even Albus Dumbledore could only swallow his pride after suffering a loss. Ha ha! It's a pity that the greatest wizard in existence deliberately pretends not to see this. I sometimes wonder if he's a spy sent by the Muggles to lead us to self-destruction, Lucius said sarcastically with a laugh. Spy? No, he doesn't deserve to be called a spy. At best, he's just a white leftist whose brain has been fried. Zhang Cheng curled his lips in disdain. White leftist? It was obviously the first time Lucius had heard this term, and he showed an interested expression. Ah, it refers to those idiots who claim to be virtuous and think that they can use love and justice to influence the world. In their concept, the minority is always more important than the majority, and animals are always more important than humans. It's even to the point of wanting to ban all human beings from eating animals. Look at Dumbledore. Isn't that the theory he preaches? Zhang Cheng explained meaningfully. Just as Lucius was about to express his views on such people, he suddenly saw his son and Harry Potter walking over. He immediately hid his sarcastic face and greeted them with a smile. How was it? Did you find anything interesting? We didn't find anything interesting, but we bought some souvenirs. Malfoy showed off the doll and hat in his hand. Me too. Harry raised the magic binoculars in his hand. Where's Hermione? Isn't she with you? Zhang Cheng immediately asked when he noticed that one person was missing from the team. Harry turned around and pointed to a red tent in the distance. Granger and Zhang Xiao are playing tarot divination with a gypsy over there. They probably won't come out for a while. Gypsy tarot, card divination? Sounds interesting. Maybe I should go and take a look. Sorry, excuse me for a moment. Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed strangely, and he quickly walked toward the red tent. He could feel that the tent was filled with a strange magical energy. Although it was difficult for ordinary wizards to detect, it was as conspicuous as a bright light in the night to him. Obviously, this was not a divination at all, but a premeditated approach. Zhang Cheng, who had always considered problems from the worst perspective of human nature, did not think that this was a prank or a joke between friends. Calm. Wonderful house. Calm. Chapter 759. Ah, the Queen in reverse. This card represents a happy life, full of feminine charm and a fruitful relationship. My beautiful lady, congratulations. Your future is very strong. Inside the red tent, a woman with a veil covering her face, revealing only 2 brown eyes, was holding a tarot card and explained with a smile on her face. Her entire body was covered with small and large amulets, pendants, and other small accessories. Sitting across the table was none other than Hermione Granger, who had been invited to watch the Quidditch World Cup final. Needless to say, like most girls who had just entered puberty, she inevitably began to have an interest in the opposite sex. Especially the ambiguous atmosphere a few days ago, it encouraged this fantasy to stay in her mind, so much so that she forgot her disdain for divination. In contrast, Zhang Xiao, who was next to her, looked a little sad, because she had drawn the lover card, and it was the lover card that was placed upside down. According to the definition of the tarot card, this meant that her relationship was frustrated and her lover or friend would betray her. It was a bad omen. Sounds good. Hermione did not notice the reaction of her friend. Her eyes were shining with excitement and anticipation. Just as she was about to take out her money to buy the card as a souvenir, the veiled gypsy woman suddenly stretched out a finger and pointed at the wooden box on the table, asking, "Beautiful lady, I don't know if you're interested in looking at a treasure that can really change the fate of others. I promise, it will definitely not disappoint you." A treasure that can change fate. Zhang Qiu's eyes widened, showing an expression of interest, although there was a voice called rational in her heart that kept reminding her that this was most likely a trick to cheat money. The emotional voice kept shouting that as long as it was not too expensive, she must buy it to reverse the bad luck brought by the lover card. Yes, this is a treasure passed down to me by my grandmother. 100 gypsy witches died to make it. Now let me show it to you. As the last word left her mouth, the gypsy woman pressed her hand on the lid of the box and opened it very carefully and slowly. But before the lid was opened halfway, she suddenly stopped all her movements, and then her whole body trembled involuntarily. About 10 seconds later, a familiar voice came from behind. "You are very perceptive and smart. Do you know? If you had dared to open the lid just now, then I'm afraid you'd already be a cold corpse." Just as he finished speaking, a black shadow walked out from the darkness behind the tent. It was Zhang Chung himself. However, there was no trace of the friendliness that he usually pretended to have. His eyes flickered with the light of destruction and death. My lord, I can explain." The gypsy woman was obviously frightened. To be exact, she felt an aura that was even more terrifying and despairing than Voldemort's. "Explain? No, you don't need to explain. I don't like to listen to a pawn's explanation. I'm very sorry, but it seems that your companion will have to complete the mission alone. As for you, I won't kill you, but I need to send a clear message to your master." With that, Zhang Chung raised his hand and aimed at the other party, shooting out a light blue light. In an instant, the woman felt that her sensory organs were infinitely magnified. Even the thin clothes and jewelry she was wearing became abnormally oppressive. In the next second, heart-drilling and bone-gouging. "Ah!" As Zhang Chung chanted the famous heart-drilling curse, the woman immediately let out an extremely painful scream. Not only was her voice filled with despair, her tears, snot, saliva, and even feces were completely incontinent. It was as if she had completely lost the ability to think. There was only one task left in her brain, and that was to endure an indescribable pain. It must be known that the heart drilling and bone gouging was not a normal torture in the ordinary sense. It was a type of torture that directly affected the nerves and even the depths of the soul. Generally speaking, even if Voldemort used it to punish subordinates who made mistakes, it rarely lasted more than 15 seconds. This was because once this duration was exceeded, there was a possibility of mental breakdown and becoming a lunatic or an idiot. But now, not only was this unlucky woman suffering the torture of the heart-drilling curse, her senses had also been magnified countless times. It was as if she had gone crazy in an instant, and there was no possibility of recovery at all. This meant that even though Zhang Chung did not kill her, he gave her a torture worse than death. She would live the rest of her life in a muddle-headed state without self-awareness. Hermione was undoubtedly frightened by this sudden event. She forcefully covered her mouth and forced herself not to make a sound. It took a full 7 to 8 minutes before she calmed down. With a trembling voice, she asked, "Why did you do this? What's in the box?" "Trust me, it's better if you don't know. I can only tell you that it's an evil magical item created by killing and twisting the souls of 100 witches. If the box had been opened just now, your souls and bodies would have been controlled by the evil magic, triggering the dark personality in the depths of your subconscious. In the end, you would have completely become puppets under control." Having said that, Zhang Chung grabbed the box and squeezed it with his fingers. Asterisk bang. Asterisk the wooden box, along with its contents, was crushed into pieces. At the same time, countless black, mist-like skulls flew out from within. They constantly wandered around the tent, howling and wildly attacking everything they came into contact with. He had always been dismissive of this kind of low-level stuff that had no technical content. The essence of magic was understanding and control. If a magical item could not be controlled by the creator and was full of all kinds of accidents and uncertainties, then it was 100% a failed product, no matter how powerful it was. Damn it, who is she? She actually wants to put a curse on us. Zhang Xiu also recovered from the shock and stared fiercely at the crazy gypsy woman. As a senior, she had already read some books about curses and understood how vicious the other party's actions were. If I'm not wrong, she should be Voldemort's servant. I suggest that the two of you should be more vigilant and not act alone for the next few days. Among the Death Eaters under the Dark Lord, there aren't many who are clear-headed. Most of them are crazy people with abnormal brains who like to act on their own. Due to your relationship with Harry, the possibility of you being attacked is very high. Zhang Cheng revealed some information that was half true and half false. Oh my God, this is too scary. Hermione subconsciously tightened her grip on the magic wand that was hidden in her pocket. Previously, she did not have a clear understanding of the war in the magical world, but now that she personally experienced the unscrupulous madness, she finally understood how wise the decision she made some time ago was. Everyone had to take sides in this battle. No one could be spared. Chapter 760. After the inexplicable attack, the young people who loved excitement did not go out for the next few days. Instead, they stayed in the luxurious tent of the Malfoys. Especially when Harry Potter knew that Voldemort might do something unfavorable to him and his friends, he fell into a nervous state. Even when he slept at night, he was often awakened by nightmares. From time to time, he would touch the lightning-shaped scar on his forehead and fall into deep thought. Obviously, the Dark Lord was using the connection between the two to pry into the boy's privacy, trying to figure out what attitude Zhang Cheng had towards Harry. In his plan, killing the boy who survived the disaster had become the most direct and best way to celebrate his return. After all, most of the stupid, low-level wizards believed that it was this newborn baby that caused the Dark Lord, who was known as the most powerful wizard in British history, to suffer a shameful defeat. Only by killing Harry Potter could he prove to everyone, including the Death Eaters, that what happened more than a decade ago was just an accident, the result of his carelessness. But unfortunately, the plan now encountered a small problem. His mysterious ally did not seem to support this approach, and even expressed his attitude in a rather intense way. But Zhang Cheng himself thoughtfully ignored Voldemort's probing and pretended that nothing had happened. He continued to cultivate the trust and ambiguous relationship between him and Hermione, and also took the time to teach the girl some magical knowledge from other worlds. In this way, the days passed, and soon, the day of the Quidditch World Cup finals arrived. Sitting in the VIP seats with the best view, Lucius Malfoy forced himself to be calm until the surrounding audience was attracted by the intense competition. Then, he lowered his voice and asked, "Do you think it will make a move now? Now, in front of 100,000 spectators?" Zhang Cheng glanced at the sea of people in the ring-shaped stadium and immediately shook his head with a smile. As long as he hasn't completely gone crazy, he won't do such a stupid thing. You have to understand that the most important thing to create panic and chaos is to maintain a sense of mystery so that the people can't figure out who the enemy is. Then, they will inevitably fall into a state of self-preservation and start to doubt and distrust each other. In addition, attacking during the day would expose too many secrets. If it were me, I would choose to attack in the middle of the night. In that case, the attack will happen tonight. Lucius wasn't stupid. He quickly guessed the time the Dark Lord had chosen to take action. It was important to note that the adepts from all over the world would at most stay for a night of revelry after the tournament ended. They would then embark on their journey back home. If Voldemort really wanted to create some big news, tonight would be his last chance. That's right. Watch the match carefully. After tonight, the whole British magic world will change, and you will be very busy. After saying these meaningful words, Zhang Cheng glanced at the Minister of Magic, Connolly Fudge, who was not far away and had no idea what was going on. It would not be long before this old man, who was obsessed with power, status, and wealth, would become the sharpest sword he could use against Albus Dumbledore. Accompanied by enthusiastic cheers and applause, the 422nd World Cup final finally came to a successful conclusion. The Irish team defeated the Bulgarian team by a narrow margin and picked up the trophy that symbolized the highest honor in the magic world. Fortunately, the two teams representing the United Kingdom, England, and Scotland had been eliminated long ago. Otherwise, who knew if there would be international news of Quidditch hooligans causing havoc at an awards ceremony in this land full of football hooligans? However, this had little to do with Zhang Cheng. In fact, his attention had never been attracted by the so-called competition. When the revelry that lasted for most of the night ended, and people returned to their tents to rest, the attack and riot came as expected. Voldemort's subordinates did not conceal themselves this time. First, they fired a huge mark of the dark demon directly into the sky, summoning the Death Eaters hidden among the ordinary people. Then, they formed a team and began to madly attack the law enforcement officers used by the Ministry of Magic to maintain order. In just 10 minutes, at least 6 or 7 people died on the spot, more than 30 were seriously injured, and more than 100 were seriously injured. Even in the world of ordinary people, this could be regarded as a terrorist attack that shocked the whole world, not to mention that the number of wizards was much smaller. Listening to the panic-filled screams and painful wails in the distance, Zhang Cheng sighed slightly and said, "A new round of the Wizard War has finally officially begun. Yes, the Death Eaters have been suppressed for too long and have also endured for too long. Soon, the United Kingdom's magic world will be flooded with blood." Lucius clenched one of his arms tightly and nodded. As a former member of the Death Eaters, at this moment, he could clearly feel that the mark of the dark demon engraved on his arm was producing a violent burning sensation. This was a sign that the Dark Lord was summoning his subordinates. "Teacher, what do we need to do next?" Harry Potter asked cautiously. We don't need to do anything. We just need to be patient. You have to understand that Voldemort is not a patient person." Before Zhang Cheng could finish speaking, a masked man suddenly appeared out of thin air, bowed with one hand on his chest, and said in a magically disguised voice, "Good evening, Your Excellency. On behalf of the Dark Lord, I extend an invitation to you. He is eager to talk to you face to face about Harry Potter." "Oh, he actually has the guts to meet me." Zhang Cheng raised his eyebrows in surprise. He would not forget that the last time they met, the other party had specially made a magic mirror to hide his true position in order to prevent any accidents. The Dark Lord is fearless. Even if it was death, there would be a day when he would conquer it. "Please follow me. He doesn't like to wait." As he spoke, the masked man raised his wand and prepared to cast Shadow Shift. Just as Zhang Cheng was about to walk over and let the other party lead him to complete the teleportation, he suddenly realized that Hermione had unknowingly pulled on his clothes, her eyes revealing anxiety and concern. Seeing this scene, he bent down and kissed the girl's forehead, smiled, and comforted her. "Don't worry, my dear, I'll be fine. Be careful. I'll always be here waiting for you to come back. I'll definitely be back before daybreak at the latest. I promise." As the last word fell, Zhang Cheng grabbed the stranger's sleeve and disappeared with a whoosh. The next second, he directly appeared in an old house that emitted a strong smell of decay. The surrounding floor and decorations were covered in a thick layer of dust and cobwebs. Who knew how long it had been since they were maintained? The lighting equipment was not even electric, only 2 candles emitting a weak light. Chapter 761. You're finally here, my dear friend." With an extremely recognizable voice, Voldemort finally revealed his distorted and ugly temporary body. It had to be said that his talent in magic was indeed admirable. Even in a miserable state between life and death, he was still able to use limited resources to ensure that he did not really die. Other things aside, just this baby-like body alone contained a large amount of advanced necromancy magic, which could ensure that the incomplete and cursed soul would not be swallowed up by the omnipresent law of death. If it had been anyone else, including Albus Dumbledore, they definitely wouldn't have survived Voldemort's ordeal. However, not only did he manage to survive, but he also actively planned to reconstruct his body and appear in front of the world as a living person. Without a doubt, this alone was enough to prove that he had the right to claim that he had conquered death. After realizing this, Zhang Cheng put away his previous contemptuous attitude and sincerely praised, "Good evening, esteemed the Dark Lord. I have to admit that your attainments in magic are far greater than Dumbledore's, and far beyond my expectations." "Ha ha, I accept your compliment. You must know that I took a huge risk in arranging this meeting, but now it seems to be worth it, isn't it?" Voldemort let out an ear-piercing laugh. In order to resolve the conflict between the two of them quickly, he broke his usual cautious style in order to find out whether this mysterious Eastern magus was an enemy or an ally. If he was an enemy, then he would definitely not let go of the chance to kill him while he was weak. If he was an ally, then this would be a good opportunity to be frank and close the distance between them. It was said that success in any field was essentially a dangerous gamble. Success would naturally be praised by countless people, but failure would only be mercilessly mocked. Obviously, the Dark Lord had won the gamble this time. Zhang Cheng did not want to kill Voldemort at this time, as that would cause him to lose a very useful chess piece, and, at the same time, cause many of his subsequent plans to be full of uncertainty. Thus, he only nodded slightly. Yes, it is very worth it. At least we have a reason to establish a relationship of trust and not continue to use each other. Yes, trust. This is very important. Voldemort grinned, revealing an expression that would give most people nightmares at night. I want to know why you are protecting Harry Potter. Don't you know that he is my enemy? Enemy? Are you trying to make me laugh? A 15-year-old boy whose parents died when he was just born is actually qualified to be your enemy? No, he's not your enemy at all. He just made you lose face unintentionally. Zhang Cheng refuted straightforwardly. In fact, this so-called enemy relationship was deliberately created by Albus Dumbledore to confuse and divert the opponent's attention. As the saying goes, a lie repeated 1,000 times is the truth. No matter how ridiculous the rumor was, as long as a large group of people believed it to be true, then Voldemort had to stand up and use his actions to prove it wrong. Although it sounded stupid, for an ambitious person who was determined to subvert the existing order, especially one who used violence and intimidation to achieve his goal, this was a fatal weakness. After all, as long as Harry Potter was still alive, people would have hope in him, believing that the brave one would one day defeat the Demon King once again, so that the resistance would never truly stop. In this way, the astute Dumbledore could continue to hide in the dark to search for and destroy the soul tools, ensuring that when the final battle arrived, his opponent could no longer be resurrected from the dead. It could be said that according to Dumbledore's actions, he was more like the final boss hiding behind the scenes, and not the flamboyant Voldemort. You are right. Harry Potter is only a boy and not enough to pose any threat to me. But it is undeniable that I killed his parents with my own hands and almost killed him as well. Do you think that the enmity between us can be resolved? The Dark Lord didn't insist on his previous attitude, but instead asked a question that couldn't be avoided. Resolve? Who told you that I want to resolve the enmity between you two? Zhang Cheng spread out his hands with a playful expression. No, what I want to say is that letting Harry Potter retain his hatred and submit to you is the ideal situation. First of all, his existence can always remind you to be cautious and always be aware of betrayal behind you. Secondly, don't you think that it is very interesting to let a boy full of hatred have to work for the enemy who killed his parents in order to survive? Finally, and most importantly, Harry Potter's submission can greatly reduce the resistance of the entire British magic world. You have to understand that in order to set a trap, Dumbledore has been sparing no effort to promote the greatness of Harry Potter. So when the savior in people's hearts kneels down to the Demon King, countless ordinary wizards with weak hearts will feel incomparable shock and despair because their spirits and beliefs will be destroyed. Voldemort narrowed his eyes that were emitting a terrifying red light, as if he was considering the feasibility of this plan. After about 3 to 5 minutes, he asked seriously, "How can you guarantee that Harry Potter will kneel in front of me and swear allegiance to me?" Haha, don't worry. You should complete the resurrection ceremony first. In addition, I promise that on the day you are resurrected, Harry Potter and Dumbledore will become enemies, and the reason will be because of the love he has always preached. Zhang Cheng's mouth rose into a sinister smile. Sounds like it's worth looking forward to. I suddenly found that we are simply natural allies. Whether it is the disgust for Dumbledore's sanctimonious appearance or the thoughts in his head, we have a lot in common. Maybe... Oh, I almost forgot. I have a small gift for you. Zhang Cheng said as he took out a glass bottle filled with a mysterious black substance from his magic waste bag. Seeing this, the Death Eater in charge of pushing the cart hurriedly brought it to his master. Voldemort raised his deformed arm and gently touched it, his eyes suddenly emitting a strange light. Energy. I feel a powerful, magical energy. What is this? an unexpected product of an experiment. If you use it in the resurrection ceremony, the total amount of magic stored in your body will be greatly increased. Zhang Cheng explained calmly. Good. Very good. I am very satisfied with your small gift. In return, I have decided to teach you the theory of making soul tools. Voldemort grabbed his wand and aimed it at his head, pulling out a faintly discernible silver-white thread. Needless to say, as long as this thread that stored memories was thrown into the meditation basin, he would personally experience the process of learning how to make soul tools. Come, Wonderful Book House. Chapter 762. Soul Artifact. The unique necromancy magic technique of splitting one's soul through killing. It was also the reason why Voldemort dared to claim that he had conquered death. However, in the original story, this magic was simply described as cruel and evil. Because of this, Voldemort was labeled as someone who didn't understand love. It was as if he wasn't even a human and didn't have human thoughts and feelings. But in reality, Soul Artifact was an extremely profound magic. It had nothing to do with good or evil. It was just a way to escape death by deceiving the law of death. The theory was very simple. The moment the opponent was killed, the law of death would misjudge the death of the caster. In this way, the caster could be temporarily excluded from the law of death and be in a state between the living and the dead until someone destroyed the soul artifact. Otherwise, even if they were killed, they could be resurrected again and again. It had to be said that the magus who invented this magic was a genius. He truly saw through the great power hidden under the surface of death that mortals couldn't understand. However, the problem was that deceiving the law of death again and again wasn't an easy task. At least, other than the Dark Lord, no one else could create more than 2 soul artifacts. However, he discovered a new way to deceive the law of death. That was to put the target in a state of extreme pain, fear, and despair before killing them. And these powerful negative emotions before death could please the law of death. To be precise, it was to attract the attention of the law of death and complete the creation of the soul artifact. Exiting the meditation basin, Zhang Cheng closed his eyes and recalled everything that he had just seen. Finally, he smiled and muttered to himself, "So that's how it is. So this is the law of death that exists everywhere." Great Master, Miss Granger has been waiting for you in the living room for a long time. Dobby hurried 2 steps forward and reminded him softly, "It's fine. Let her wait a little longer. You have to understand that for a young lady of her age, there's nothing more exciting than having strong expectations." Zhang Cheng waved his hand dismissively. Then he picked up the soul artifact and released a fatal instant death spell on a mouse in the cage. In an instant, the poor mouse's soul was stripped away alive. Unfortunately, he didn't succeed in creating the corresponding soul artifact. Obviously, in this game of cheating the rules of death, killing had to be equal. In other words, if the caster was a human, he would have to kill a human to create a soul fragment. Killing other animals would not attract the attention of the law of death. Interesting, very interesting. Is this the power of the edicts of death? Zhang Cheng stroked his chin, his eyes shining with a strange light. Even though it was only less than 1/100th of a second, he truly felt the omnipresent death. It was a supreme standard that surpassed all known powers. Even the entire universe could not escape the ultimate destruction and death. Of course, he wasn't stupid enough to imitate Voldemort and split his own soul to create a so-called soul armament. That would be no different from castrating himself. On the surface, splitting one soul didn't seem to affect an adept's ability to cast spells. However, from the moment one soul was split, they had already gone down the wrong path. In fact, the composition of a person's soul was very complicated. According to the understanding of the Pharaon continent, every soul was composed of 2 opposing energies, the mortal and the extraordinary. As the name implied, the mortal was the characteristics of a mortal. For example, the emotions of joy, anger, sorrow, and joy, greed, desire, and impulsiveness. All these combine to form the complex and changeable soul of a mortal. In contrast, The part known as the extraordinary referred to the fearlessness and courage displayed by heroes in the face of danger and difficulties. They would explode with great power that even the gods would praise in order to defend what they thought was right. However, the extraordinary power was usually hidden very deeply. Only very few people could discover it and use it to create one miracle after another. It was said that somewhere in the distant universe, there was a crazy adept who once tried to strip the mortal part from his body and keep only the extraordinary part. He wanted to become a being greater than the gods. However, the result was that after he stripped the mortal part from his body, he created many clones and finally disappeared forever in the fight between the clones. Until now, Zhang Cheng had never seen anyone who dared to say that they understood the soul. Even the most powerful creator didn't dare to say so. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but sigh regretfully. Sigh, it seems that I'm still too ignorant in front of the vast knowledge. As soon as he finished speaking, he shot out a dissociation ray and disintegrated all the memories in the meditation basin into green residue. Then he raised his hand and snapped his fingers, disappearing on the spot. Seeing that her master had left, Dobby the house elf hurriedly started to clean up the rubbish and experiment remnants left behind in the basement. At the same time, Hermione, who had been sitting on the sofa in the living room for a long time, immediately stood up and raised the notebook in her hand. She shouted excitedly, "Professor, I found it." "Oh, what did you find?" Zhang Cheng, who had just teleported over, pursed his lips and asked with great interest. "A pattern. I found 2 common patterns in these seemingly messy experimental subjects." Hermione rubbed her somewhat dry eyes and responded. In order to do this well, she had been desperately staying up late recently. She had serious dark circles under her eyes and looked quite haggard. "Go on, I'm listening." Zhang Cheng picked up the teapot and poured hot tea into the cups and pushed one of them in front of the girl. Hermione picked it up and took a small sip. Then she flipped open the notebook and quickly explained, "You see, first of all, almost 70% of the experimental subjects had a benign mutation. Although it was very slight, the blood test showed that as time passed, this mutation would continue to a certain point. The degree of increase seemed to be related to the subjective wishes of the individual. Secondly, I found that a small number of men changed more violently than the others, and the duration was shorter. It was as if there was a sudden outbreak. Without a doubt, she didn't know that the names replaced by symbols on the experimental record were actually the students of Hogwarts. Sudden outbreak? Zhang Cheng subconsciously took the notebook and flipped through it. Soon, he matched the names of a few people in his mind. One of them was the unlucky guy who had died in an accident during the mutation. And they all had a very obvious common characteristic, which was that they were often bullied by their classmates in school. If Hermione's inference was correct, the source of the mutation of these experimental subjects should be an external stimulus, or the result of the accumulated dissatisfaction and resentment in their hearts. This also meant that the power of creation was actually influenced by subjective wishes and the environment, causing the host to mutate, or it could be said that it was a power that strengthened one's own ability. Calm. Wonderful house. Calm. Chapter 763. Well done. You really didn't disappoint me. After a long silence, Zhang Cheng's first sentence was to praise the girl's efforts. Although, strictly speaking, he wasn't a qualified leader and didn't care much about power that was attached to the social system, he still knew how to win over people's hearts, especially a naive and ignorant young girl who was full of unrealistic fantasies about herself. "Thank you. What I need to do next?" Hermione, who had received affirmation, couldn't wait to prove her worth. Compared to her peers who were filled with so-called romantic love thoughts, she preferred the current way of getting along, which was to use her intelligence to help the other party achieve their wishes. Next, Zhang Cheng smiled and shook his head. "What you need to do next is to have a good sleep and wait for the Hogwarts to start school. Rest? But I still don't, Don't force yourself. Close your eyes and relax your mind. I will instill some interesting knowledge into you. What you need to do is to learn in your dreams and eventually master it. Only by learning this will you be qualified to become my true assistant." Before the girl could finish speaking, Zhang Cheng whispered into her ear, The hot air that came out of his mouth when he spoke made the girl fall into a state of confusion, unable to extricate herself. Even her breathing became hurried. About 2 to 3 minutes later, her consciousness began to fade, and she finally fell into a deep sleep in the other party's arms, hypnotizing the target through simple actions and words. This was the most basic application of the psychic ability. As long as it was done properly, the target wouldn't have the slightest bit of resistance. Instead, they would completely lose themselves. Of course, Zhang Cheng wasn't simply using hypnosis. At the same time, he was also instilling a lot of important knowledge into the brain. Just as he finished all this and carried Hermione back to her room, Lucius suddenly appeared at the corner of the stairs leading to the second floor. He asked in a puzzled voice, "Sir, is a mere mud spawn worth so much effort? I promise that if you have such needs, many pure-blood noble families would be willing to send their most beloved daughters to you." "Looks like you don't know anything, do you?" Zhang Cheng glanced at him meaningfully. "Why do you think I think differently of Miss Granger? Was it just because she was pretty and cute? No, I'm not that shallow. Her talents in certain areas far exceed those of any pure-blood adept. Do you know? With the development of technology in the world of ordinary people, magic is no longer a simple occult, but a power that can be explained through science. I don't understand what this has to do with Granger." Lucius subconsciously frowned. After all, in the entire British magic world, there were actually two factions competing for power and interests. One of them was naturally the pure-blooded aristocrats, and the other was the commoners who were mixed with a large number of ordinary people. As the representative of the aristocratic party, he naturally hoped that the object of his loyalty would completely stand on the side of the aristocrats and suppress those civilians led by Dumbledore. It has a lot to do with it, because the world of ordinary people has discovered countless mysteries through scientific research, and some have even surpassed the adepts. Let me give you a simple example. Have you heard of something called genes discovered in the world of ordinary people? To put it simply, it's a special compound that exists in everyone's body. It stores all the information about a life's race, blood type, gestation, growth, death, and so on. In principle, it can even be changed through artificial intervention. Do you know what this means? Zhang Cheng asked with a hint of smile. Lucius was obviously not an idiot. His face suddenly turned ugly, and he gritted his teeth as he replied, "I know. This means that the aristocrats' theory of bloodlines will become a joke." Zhang Cheng nodded slightly. "That's right. Remember, my friend, although bloodlines will give the children of aristocratic families a higher starting point, it does not mean that they will win the final victory. I hope you can tell all the aristocrats that it is best to throw away the arrogance that has been maintained for thousands of years and open their eyes to see the world again. It will not be long before a great revolution takes place. I promise that you will obtain the knowledge, power, and authority that you have always dreamed of, but whether you can keep these in the future will depend on your own efforts." "What exactly do you want to do?" Lucius could not help but ask the question that had been buried in his heart. "It's very simple. I want to start a war and completely eliminate the advantage of ordinary people in terms of numbers. I want the adepts to once again control the entire world and establish a true magic civilization. In order to achieve this goal, we must unite all those who can be united, including those who are looked down upon by the aristocrats. Only in this way can we have enough of a population advantage to slowly enslave, digest, and absorb the remaining ordinary people after the war." Zhang Cheng sneered as he spoke of the crazy plan in his mind. Although he did not say how many people would die in this war, Lucius could not help but shiver, and his eyes revealed unconcealable shock and fear. Population had always been the shortcoming of the adepts. Using the entire British magic world as an example, it was unknown if they could gather 10,000 people. If they wanted to use such a small population to digest and absorb tens of millions of ordinary people, they would have to eliminate at least 95% of them. That was to say, they would have to kill more than 57 million people, leaving only a pitiful fraction. This kind of genocide was something that even Voldemort and the previous generations of the Dark Lord did not dare to think about, let alone him. "Ha ha! You are afraid. My friend, relax. Things like civilization have always been easier to destroy than to build. If it were in the past, it might be more troublesome to kill billions of ordinary people in the world. Even using some magical plagues would take a few hundred years. But with the development of science and technology, ordinary people have invented countless more powerful and effective weapons to destroy themselves. It won't take too long, just a few months to a year, and more than 90% of the population will die in a thermonuclear war. We only need to deal with the surviving higher-ups, and then we can regain control of the entire world. At that time, ordinary people will be slaves, sacrificing their humble lives to rebuild the entire world. When the reconstruction is completed, only adepts will be left in the world. How is it? Isn't my plan perfect? After all, it is a piece of cake for us to let those stupid, ordinary people launch nuclear weapons to destroy each other. When he said this, Zhang Cheng's eyes flashed with madness and destruction, without the slightest bit of hesitation, guilt, or hesitation. The Malfoy family is very honored to be able to contribute to your great plan. Lucius bowed deeply, his body trembling slightly uncontrollably. At this moment, he realized what a huge mistake he had made previously. He had actually naively thought that Linley was a kind and easy person to get along with. He was clearly a madman who looked gentle on the outside, but was 100 times more terrifying than anyone else on the inside. Chapter 764. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, the pleasant summer vacation was over. The students of Hogwarts ushered in a new semester. Even though the sudden attack of the Death Eaters during the Quidditch World Cup cast a shadow over the entire British magic world, and many people began to worry about the return of the Dark Lord, under the powerful suppression of the Minister of Magic, Connolly Fudge, it did not cause widespread panic in the end. The normal adepts only knew from the newspapers that there was a group of evil Death Eaters who were still unwilling to accept their failure. They tried to vent their anger and resentment by attacking the adepts. No one knew that, with the help of the chaotic situation, a black hand had quietly reached into the British Ministry of Magic and firmly controlled several important departments. It wouldn't be long before it would trigger the dark side of the human subconscious, turning the stupid and ordinary adepts into violent extremists. Of course, all of this was in preparation for the crazy plan to destroy the world. After knowing what kind of person he was loyal to, Lucius completely abandoned his fantasies and carried out his master's orders meticulously. He knew very well that the Malfoy family could only survive if this plan succeeded. If he dared to go against it, he would definitely die a worse death than the Potter family. As the saying went, fear was always the best motivation for humans to move forward quickly. Looking at Lucius, who was desperately busy trying to hide the fear in his heart, Zhangqing only smiled meaningfully. He then left the Malfoy manor and returned to the Hogwarts to play the role of a professor. In the next year, he would complete the two most important parts of the entire plan. One was to drive Dumbledore out of the Hogwarts, and the other was to wait for Voldemort to resurrect and do all the dirty and tiring work for him. Apart from that, there was another important thing, and that was to continue to study the power of creation and to a certain extent to master and control it. With a series of ulterior motives, Zhangqing finally boarded the Hogwarts Express train. He looked at the busy students and parents outside the window with great interest and muttered to himself in a voice that only he could hear, unknowingly, "I've already spent 2 years in this world. I hope this year is the last year." "What are you mumbling about?" Hermione, who was sitting beside him, raised her head and asked curiously. "No, nothing. I'm just lamenting how time flies," Zhang Cheng replied without hesitation. As she continued to digest the knowledge that was instilled into her mind, the girl could barely be called a qualified assistant. She began to be in charge of handling some relatively secret experimental data, greatly accelerating the research speed of the power of creation. Her personality also seemed to have become more mature. Her entire body exuded a faint intellectual aura that could never be possessed by people of the same age. Almost every passing student, regardless of gender, would involuntarily stop in their tracks and stare at her with eyes full of amazement. It must be known that in the minds of most students, Hermione Granger had always been a strong, self-righteous, and unlikable girl. But after Holiday, she suddenly turned into a mature, quiet beauty. Her eyes shone with confidence and wisdom. Sigh? You don't seem to be so old that you need to sigh about the passage of time, do you? The girl looked at the young and handsome face and could not help but ridicule with a smile. No, you don't understand. This has nothing to do with age. It's a special state of mind. Zhang Cheng did not explain too much. He just shook his head with a smile. Although time would not leave too many traces on his body when he was traveling between different worlds, the changes in his mind were inevitable. However, Hermione obviously did not know about this. She closed the dense English notes in her hands and said with a serious face, "Well, no matter what you're sigh about, you better give me more information quickly. Otherwise, I won't have any work to do in a week at most. Don't worry. When we return to school, I'll show you the truth behind these experimental data. It's a power that surpasses magic." Having said that, Zhangqing leaned back in his chair and pretended to close his eyes to rest. Just as Hermione was about to open her mouth and ask a few more questions, she suddenly saw two freshmen walk in and sit across from her. They looked around with curious eyes and decisively chose to shut their mouths and remain silent. Accompanied by the roar of the steam whistle, this ancient train full of students and professors finally arrived outside the castle at night. After watching the girl follow the senior students into the auditorium, Zhang Cheng went to his room alone. Before he could put down the box in his hands, he saw an old man dressed strangely standing in the corner. "Good evening. Magus from the East." The other party greeted with a cold smile. "You are Alastair Moody?" Zhang Qing narrowed his eyes and revealed an expression that was not a smile. "Ha ha ha, that's right. It's me. Remember, I'll keep an eye on you this year. Don't even think of playing any tricks." The old man who called himself Mad Eye Moody grinned and pointed at the magical eyeball that was constantly moving. "Keep an eye on me? Are you sure you're not joking, my dear Mr. Buddy Crouch Jr.? Or did your master, the Dark Lord, not teach you to never provoke me?" Zhang Cheng directly exposed the other party's little trick and mocked him mercilessly. Although the compound decoction was said to be able to perfectly change a person's external appearance, it was unable to change the thoughts in one's mind. Perhaps the brain seal spell was enough to block spells like mind extraction, but it was unable to block the invasion of psionic abilities. He only needed to read the superficial thoughts to be able to immediately identify a person's true identity. "You can see through my disguise?" Buddy Crouch Jr. was obviously shocked. "That's right. To me, most of the deception and disguises in the world have no effect. So you'd better be honest and not try to challenge my bottom line, understand?" As soon as he finished speaking, Zhang Cheng rushed forward at lightning speed and grabbed the other party's neck, his eyes emitting a bone-piercing chill. Let go of me." Buddy Crouch Jr., who felt suffocated, desperately tried to pry open the hand that was choking his windpipe. Unfortunately, his pitiful strength was not enough to compete with a body that had been transformed by divinity. The more he struggled, the tighter the hold became, and his consciousness gradually became blurred. "Get lost." Seeing that the guy's eyes were rolling back, Zhang Cheng released his hands and threw him out of the door like a rag doll. With a loud bang, Barty Crouch Jr. made an intimate contact with the hard marble wall before he was thrown to the ground. He kept retching and coughing, and it took him a few minutes to return to normal. He then quickly disappeared at the end of the dim corridor.